Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I was 20 minutes into my dawn patrol when dispatch cut through the static with a call that sounded routine. Until it didn't. The voice was trembling, old with years and loneliness, coming from a house on Maple Street in Dryan. They said a woman thought someone was outside, whispering her name. I'd heard plenty of prank calls in 20 years, but something in the urgency froze me. The road was slick with overnight frost as I turned off the main highway onto narrowing side streets. My cruiser's red and blue lights reflected on low-hanging clouds, and the only sound was the wiper's rhythmic scrape. No street lamps here, just pitch black, until I cleared the last bend. I eased the car to a stop in front of a simple colonial home, its paint gray and flaking. A single window upstairs was lit like a silent beacon. I killed the engine, but kept the lights on low. I didn't want to blind whoever was out there, if there was someone. Knocking was pointless. I nudged the door gently and saw an elderly woman, her shoulders wrapped in a faded robe, hair pinched into a gray bun. She fell into my arms before I even introduced myself. "He knew my name," she whispered, voice brittle. She trembled like a leaf in a storm. He said, "Eleanor, come to me," but I never told him my name. Her eyes fixed on the darkness behind me. I flicked on my flashlight and swept it across the front yard. Nothing. The crisp air bit at my face as I followed her gaze to the back door, hanging slightly ajar. No damage, no footprints, just that door, open in a house that should have been locked up tight for the night. I went inside, following her path as she backed away. The hallway floor was cool beneath my boots, the colonial oak floorboards polished but warped by cold. The light from her nightstand spilled into the corridor, illuminating family photographs. A younger Eleanor smiling beside a man in a Navy uniform. I knelt and studied the picture. Her husband, I assumed, proud, steady-faced. He passed 3 years ago, she'd said. Since then, it had been just her, the memory of him, and now, a stranger calling her from the dark. She insisted she heard footsteps on the back porch. I stepped outside and scanned the yard. The frozen ground was smooth, except for a single set of prints leading toward the woods. They stopped abruptly at the tree line and faded into nothing. I crouched to examine them. Boot treads, size 10, but the pattern was odd. Scattered heel marks, like the wearer was testing the ground. I pressed the mic on my shoulder. "Dispatch, this is 504. No sign of forced entry, one set of footprints leading into the woods, then nothing. Requesting additional patrols in the area." I explained away the door as a teenager's prank more than I believed it. Probably some kid looking to scare an old woman, I told Eleanor, offering a weak smile. She nodded, clutching her robe. Her face was pale, eyes distant. I stayed until the sun hinted at rising, then made a quick report. Prowler, possible prank, extra patrols. I left Maple Street and drove back through the frost, radio silent. Something about that night felt wrong, but I chalked it up to the monotony of winter patrols until the next call. 2 nights later, I got the second call. Same early morning hours, same remote end of Dryan. This time, it was on Cedar Lane. Another elderly woman, Mrs. Jennings, who insisted she heard her name called outside. By then, I'd warned dispatch and the shift would double-check anything like that. But when I arrived, Mrs. Jennings pushed open her front storm door, wide-eyed. "Detective Kenny," she said, using my rank, though I hadn't introduced myself yet. "You have to hurry. He's out there calling me." I should have felt incensed at her mixing me up with someone else. But my heart pounded too fast. I hustled inside, glanced out her kitchen window. Footprints in the frost, same pattern, same disappearing act at tree line. I didn't say anything about patterns, just knocked on my own door and swept the beam with practiced calm. No broken locks, no sign of a struggle. But the fear in her eyes was real. I ran her through the same process. Secure the house, scan for signs, file a report. But I also asked dispatch to flag both calls and check for commonalities. We found 5 such calls in 5 nights. Maple Street, Cedar Lane, Birch Avenue, Elm Court, and Pine Road. All solitary residences. All elderly residents. All hearing a man whisper their names outside. Some swore they felt a presence in the parlor. None were hurt, none taken, but each shaken. My report categories went from prank prowler to suspicious caller, possible targeted harassment. But it still didn't explain who knew these women personally, or why. Back at the station, I pored over the log sheets. I noted timestamps, locations, weather reports. A pattern emerged. Each call came exactly 45 minutes apart, starting at 4:17 a.m., but nothing rang alarm bells. Just 5 separate files, 5 isolated pranks. On my way out, Captain Marsh gave me a sidelong look. "Keep it tight, Kenny," he said. "Don't want rumors stirring." I nodded, but felt a cold knot tighten. Rumors weren't the worry. If someone was selecting houses with surgical precision, we were dealing with something far from random. 3 weeks after the first call, I took a fresh look at the victim's records. That's when I noticed the medical sheets. Each of the 5 women had been treated at Dryan Regional within the last 6 months. 4 for fractures, 1 for pneumonia, each on the same floor. Each discharged around midnight. I flagged health services and requested a list of nurses working that night shift. One name came up repeatedly, Gabriel Watts. I'd never met him. He'd transferred in 6 months ago, but his schedule overlapped every patient. I sent a plain clothes unit to his apartment for a welfare check. Inside, the place was neat, sterile, suspiciously clinical for a private home. No pets, no personal mementos, just a desk with files, notebooks, and loose pages listing names, addresses, and notes like alone, quiet, known memory lapses. I opened a battered notebook. Watts had detailed dozens of patients. Notations about their exit times, living situations, and mental states. Among them were the 5 women who'd called 911. My stomach churned when I found pages labeled testing. Entries noting whether the patient responded to name calls. More footprints leading away from houses scrawled next to addresses. We found pills, heavy sedatives, hidden in his medicine cabinet, and syringes with traces of those exact drugs. No bodies yet, but we arrested Watts on multiple counts: stalking, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. Interrogation broke open the truth. He'd memorized names from charts, visited homes weeks later under cover of darkness, whispered their names to see if they'd answer, because that would prove they felt safe. He was calculating, clinical to the core. But Watts had done more than harass. We dug into cold death certificates from the hospitals where he worked previously. 7 patients, older women, had died of natural causes after midnight. No autopsies, no foul play noted. I pulled those files, heart pounding with dread. The pills we found matched medication levels in those toxicology reports. He'd practically wiped the records clean. They never saw what hit them, he told me, deadpan. I was just being kind. They tried to bury his confessions, even after conviction. Settlements, sealed transcripts, off-the-record agreements with families. Captain Marsh warned me, stay focused on Dryan. Don't stir the pot. But the pot broke first. Newspapers finally ran the story. Small headlines tucked on page 12. It spread statewide, eventually nationally. Hospitals changed protocols. Patient confidentiality got stricter. But those 5 women, they still look over their shoulders even in daylight. Eleanor Walsh moved away, sold the Maple Street house. She left a note for me. Thank you for listening, even when no one else heard me. Sometimes I drive by her old home at dawn. The frost still glitters there, but the footprints have never returned. The next night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, its drone mixing with the distant call of a lone train whistle. I replayed Watts's confession in my mind, how he had methodically planned each visit, how he had evaluated his targets through broken hospital records, how he had crept into their homes in the pre-dawn hours, speaking their names in adoption of trust before his true intent revealed itself. I thought of the 5 women, in particular Eleanor, whose house I had seen so many times since that first call. I wondered if she still woke in a cold sweat, scanning her porch for phantom figures. At 3:50 a.m., when I should have been on my way home, my radio crackled to life. Unit 504, Code 2. Response: break-in in progress at 42 Hillcrest Drive. My heart seized at the urgency. Hillcrest was less than 5 minutes from my apartment. I grabbed my jacket, holstered my service weapon, and bolted for the cruiser, mind racing with fragments of Watts's notebook. Addresses scrawled in neat script, each one marked with a single footprint illustration. Was this just another disenfranchised neighbor, or something more sinister? I made the turn onto Hillcrest and saw the flashing blue lights of a patrol car half-block away. I drove past it and pulled up at the curb near the address. The house was dark, no porch light, no sign of life except the broken window at the back. Rain had begun to fall, and droplets glistened on the frosted siding. The patrol officers were crouched behind the cruiser's bumper, rifles trained across the wet pavement. I radioed, "Stand by for my approach," then exited my car, flashlight and weapon raised. Inside, the house smelled like stale coffee and lavender. A thick rug lay askew in the living room, coffee table overturned, cushions scattered. I followed the faint rustle up the staircase, each step groaning in protest. At the top, the hallway was dimly lit by the occasional flicker of a faulty ceiling bulb. The pages of a torn notebook fluttered at my feet. Watts's handwriting. Hillcrest, target number 6, Miss Parker. That detail stabbed me in the chest. Target number 6. Mrs. Parker wasn't one of the 5 names we'd initially linked, but there she was on his list, ominous and new. I pressed on, following the narrow corridor to the master bedroom. The door was slightly open. I kicked it gently, no resistance, then swept the beam of my flashlight across the room. The bed was neatly made. Folded clothes sat on a dresser. No sign of a struggle. I moved toward the window and noticed footprints on the deck outside, leading around the corner of the house. I pointed them out to the 2 officers behind me who quietly exchanged glances. Then I saw it. A shadow slipping across the far wall. A shape perched in the corner behind the curtain. A man's silhouette, tall and gaunt. My pulse doubled as I signaled to the officers to fan out. They obeyed, covering possible escape routes. I took a step toward the figure, voice low and authoritative. "This is the police. Come out with your hands where I can see them." Silence. then a soft exhale behind me. I spun around. There stood Mrs. Parker, eyes wide and hollow. She was clad in a thin nightgown, hands trembling at her sides. "Officer," she whispered, voice quavering. I heard him again. He knew my name, just like the others. I realized then that the list in Watts's notebook was more than a registry of victims. It was a countdown that he had begun months ago in hospital corridors, long before the first knock at Maple Street. Each name he memorized carried him closer to something he intended to finish. He wasn't merely testing vulnerability, he was perfecting his timing, his method, choosing the moment when his prey would be most defenseless. We secured Mrs. Parker in a patrol cruiser and began a systematic search of the property. Police dogs worked the perimeter. Forensics scoured the ground for traces of DNA or fibers. The back porch offered little more than the same telltale footprints leading into the thicket. Yet no trace of the intruder. He had slipped away again, an almost imperceptible specter in the night. Back at the station, the log for Hillcrest Drive was filed under attempted burglary, suspect at large, but I knew there was nothing accidental about that call. It was another test run for a man who had perfected his technique. He had watched Mrs. Parker's vital signs in the hospital, determined the exact moment she would be too weakened by her ailments to respond physically. He walked away, safe in the knowledge that she would drift back to sleep, shaken but unharmed, convinced it was perhaps her mind playing tricks. Through the following days, I pored again over his notes, connecting dots in my mind. Each patient treated by Watts matched a location on his list. Each call precisely 45 minutes apart. Each intended to assess vulnerability through personal connection, calling a name, earning trust, then using unseen knowledge to deliver a silent doom. I understood then that for Watts, it wasn't about money or provocation. It was about control, proving that even the strongest protocols could be undone by a single, well-placed whisper. Before I left the station that shift, I walked to Commander Ruiz's office and slid the Hillcrest report onto his desk. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "What do you make of it?" I asked, voice taut. He sighed and picked up the file. "We're dealing with a predator," he said, eyes hard. "A predator who knows the system better than anyone. We'll tighten patrols, notify neighboring precincts." I left the station that morning with my mind heavy, wondering how many other names remained unspoken, how many more whispers in the dark were still to come. Outside, the dawn was breaking, but it brought no relief. Only the knowledge that the quiet before sunrise could hide far more than just the night's shadows. I barely slept the next 2 nights. My dreams were haunted by the question, how many had slipped through his fingers before Dryan? I kept revisiting the 5 original victims, imagining Gabriel Watts standing at their doors under the frozen moonlight, whispering their names in the dark. How many elderly souls had succumbed before someone pieced it together? I woke early, restless, and found myself back at the precinct, rifling through past reports for similar calls that never made sense. My desk was a mess of case files, notebooks, and coffee cups, the red "Confidential" stamp eerily familiar from Watts's folder. By mid-afternoon, I drew a line across a map on the situation board. Maple, cedar, birch, elm, pine, Hillcrest, and then a question mark at the 6th location, Mrs. Parker's. I stared at the blank space beneath it. Watts's notebook had dozens of names, each crossed off once he'd tested them. How many names remained uncrossed? Who was next? I took a deep breath and grabbed my keys. There was another address waiting to be checked. The 6th name on his list wasn't just Mrs. Parker. It was someone whose file I recognized. Daniel Reyes, a retired Marine living alone on Alder Road. He was 48, not elderly, but he'd been discharged after a traumatic brain injury and lived with daytime confusion. His chart noted that he sometimes failed to recognize strangers. Perfectly vulnerable. Perfect for Watts's twisted experiments. I arrived at Daniel's home around 9 p.m. The sky was overcast, and the rain fell in a steady drizzle. I parked 2 houses down to avoid alerting him. The porch light was on but dim, and steam curled from a cracked window. I walked up quietly, pressing my back against the siding and peeking through the window. Daniel sat in an armchair just inside, the television muted, his gaze blank. His house was neat, metal ribbons framed on the walls, photographs of family I knew he hadn't seen in years. I tapped on the glass. He looked up, recognition flickering for a moment before fear clouded his eyes. "Officer," he said, voice trembling, "you're not supposed." He stopped, confusion washing over him. I opened the door and stepped in, lightly closing it behind me. The air smelled of antiseptic and old paper. I followed the faint glow of his lamp to the living room where he sat. I crouched beside his chair. "Daniel, I need you to tell me if someone's been calling your name at night." He blinked, looked past me toward the doorway as though someone were standing there. "Last night," he whispered, I thought it was my daughter." His voice cracked. "She's in California now. I told her not to come back." He licked his lips, sweat beading at his brow. I answered. I opened the door. My pulse quickened. This was exactly what Watts had said. Watch for the moment they felt safe enough to open the door. I pulled out my flashlight and swept beneath his windowsill. Nothing. I carefully checked the lock. He'd left the door ajar. No forced entry. I straightened and switched on my body cam. "Daniel, I'm going to stay a while. I want you to keep me in sight." He nodded, gripping the armrests. For the next hour I sat across from him, watching the empty street. Every creak of the floor, every drip of rain set my nerves on edge. I reviewed Watts's notes on my phone, how he rated each test. Response, positive. Unlocked door, yes. Safe entry, probable. Months of planning distilled into a sick checklist. And here I was, hoping there would be no further flicker of movement. At 10:17 p.m., the porch light flickered and went out. The house plunged into darkness, save for the lamplight and the glimmer of streetlights through the window. Daniel's breathing hitched. I rose, signaling to dispatch to send backup to my location. I stepped to the door, weapon drawn, flashlight sweeping outside. No one in sight. The rain still fell, washing away footprints from earlier. I turned back to Daniel. He sat trembling, eyes wide, and whispered, "I hear him again." His hand pointed toward the side gate. I walked with him, following his finger to the back door, slightly open. The wind rattled the screen door. I pressed my forehead against the glass and saw nothing. Then I saw it. Under the back porch light, footprints, wider, deeper than the others. He'd grown bolder, testing not just names but strength. Watts had started with the vulnerable, but now he was escalating, perhaps seeing if he could finish the job. I radioed for the K-9 unit and additional support. Within minutes, a van of officers rolled up and surrounded the house. We swept inside, room by room, clear. No sign of Watts, no sign of struggle, no sign of forced exit. But on the kitchen counter sat a single pill bottle, empty. I knelt, discovered the label, diazepam, 200 milligrams, a lethal dose for someone like Daniel. I poured the remaining pills into an evidence bag. As I stood in the dim kitchen, rain streaking the windows, I realized Watts's plan. Test, observe. And if the target was too frail to resist, administer a fatal dose. Daniel was shaken but alive because Daniel's strength had outlasted him that night. But how many hadn't been so lucky? The thought made my stomach churn. Back at the station, I updated the log. Attempted sedative poisoning, suspect evaded. But I changed the title to Attempted Homicide, Suspect at Large. I added notes on the pill bottle and the timeline. And I wrote in the margin, Next victim, unknown. I went home well past midnight, mind racing. The quiet in my apartment felt oppressive, as though Watts could be standing in the corner watching. I left the porch light on and slept in, my clothes. The nightmares came, but I welcomed them. Better to face them than the emptiness of waking fear. I woke to a pounding headache and the harsh glare of my alarm clock. My head felt heavy, like it had been submerged under cold water. I snapped awake, drenched in sweat, the taste of metal at the back of my throat. The nightmare. A dozen footprints encircling my bed, each one larger than life, stepping closer and closer until I couldn't breathe. Then, darkness. I swung my legs out of bed and flicked on the lamp. The room was exactly as I left it. My uniform lay crumpled on a chair. My firearm rested on the nightstand. I took a deep breath and shoved memories of the dream aside. It was just my mind playing tricks. I had a job to do. At the station, the tension was thick. Captain Marsh's office door stood ajar, unusual for this hour. I poked my head in. He didn't look up from the dispatch board. "We've got another report," he said, voice low. "Mobile Drive, single-story ranch, elderly couple." I stiffened. Mobile wasn't on Watts's list, not yet, but the pattern had spread, from 5 original targets to Helen Parker to Daniel Reyes, and now a couple together. I grabbed my notebook. What did the call say? Mrs. Holloway claimed she heard her husband calling her first by name, then a woman's voice repeating it back. No forced entry, footprints in the grass. He pointed at the board where Holloway, Mobile, was scribbled in red. "We need you on scene as soon as possible." I nodded and hurried out. On the drive, every shadow behind the cruiser's headlights leaped at me. The silhouette of a man standing just off the road, the dark thicket beyond fence posts, the reflection of street signs that spelled out warnings I didn't want to pronounce. When I reached the Holloway residence, torches from the patrol cars lit the yard in harsh, fractured patterns. The moon played peekaboo with clouds. Mrs. Holloway, a frail woman in her 70s, wrapped a blanket around herself on the porch. Mr. Holloway stood beside her, shoulders slumped, face ashen. "I heard my name," Mrs. Holloway whispered, voice trembling like glass. Then his voice said, "Come back to bed, Mary. But my name is Evelyn, and my husband is Robert." Mr. Holloway shook his head. It was me, calling her back from the kitchen. He said quietly, "But it wasn't my voice. It was heavier." His gaze drifted toward the darkened yard. "We locked the door, the alarm is armed, but still..." He trailed off. I checked the front door. It was locked, alarm panel green, no breach. I shone my flashlight across the lawn. Footprints, 2 distinct sets, side by side, stopping at the back porch. One set was narrow, women's shoes, the other large, heavy boots. They vanished into the night as though the ground itself had claimed them. Inside, the Holloways repeated parts of their stories. I filed details. No signs of forced entry, no footprints past the door, inexplicable voices. Yet the voices were real enough. They named Mrs. Holloway, invited her back into a bed she'd been tucked safely in hours ago. My radio buzzed with the forensics team's arrival. I escorted them to the backyard. Under the faint glow of their torches, I spotted something I hadn't noticed in earlier cases. A single red thread of yarn, snagged on a fence post, fluttering like a heartbeat. Yarns didn't belong on boots. I bagged it. As the team dusted the ground for prints, I talked with Mrs. Holloway, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked at me with scared eyes. "Officer Kenny," she said, "please don't let him come back." I offered what comfort I could. "We'll find him, I promise. You're safe now." But I wasn't sure I believed it. Back at the station, I compared the thread to Mrs. Parker's, to Daniel's empty pill bottle, to notes in Watts's file. Nothing matched. This was new. He'd adapted again. Moved from solitary elderly victims to a couple. Left breadcrumbs in the form of yarn instead of footprints. Each clue was a breadcrumb through his twisted mind. I drafted a new plan. Increase patrols on known target streets. Canvass neighbors for any sightings of a figure or vehicles. Issue a bulletin for unusual threads or fibers found at crime scenes. As I made calls, I realized I'd spent more time chasing shadows than daylight. My uniform felt heavier, my duty more burdensome. The station felt cramped, the walls closing in with every unanswered question. That night, I barely registered the drive home. When I stumbled into my apartment, I found the same eerie postcard I'd woken to this morning, resting on my kitchen counter. A pair of footprints printed in black ink, leading away from a silhouette of two figures. No note, no signature, just the chilling image. I stared at it until dawn, flashlight in hand. I'd seen paper used to line boxes in Watts's files. I'd seen notes scrawled in those notebooks. And now, a taunt. A promise of more to come. I didn't sleep again, couldn't. My mind replayed the postcard's footprints and the chilling realization that Watts, or someone inspired by him, was escalating. If that anonymous warning had arrived in my own apartment, it meant either he'd broken in again or an accomplice was testing me. Either way, the predator was getting bolder, challenging me directly. When dawn finally crept through the blinds, I forced myself out of bed, heart pounding. I showered without thinking, donned my uniform, and grabbed a fresh coffee on the way to the station. The on-watch sergeant gave me a wary look. "You look rough," he said. I managed a curt nod. At roll call, I found the department in high alert. Captain Marsh outlined the new pattern. 5 original victims, all elderly, alone. 7th test, the Holloways, a couple with footprints side by side. Direct taunt, the postcard in my own home. Area of operations now stretching across 2 precinct boundaries. He paused, scanning our faces. This isn't random. Someone's orchestrating a campaign. We have to find him before another life is at stake. He tasked me with leading a strike team to canvass the locations tied to Watts's notebook and the new anonymous notes, while he coordinated with neighboring jurisdictions. I swallowed hard, feeling both the weight of that responsibility and a surge of determination. I would catch this monster, even if it killed me to stand watch again at those icy doorsteps. By mid-morning, I stood in the parking lot of Dryan Regional Medical Center, the steel and glass facade gleaming under low clouds. I'd hoped the hospital could shed clues. Someone must have seen Watts's unusual behavior there. Rumors of patients reporting whispered calls in corridors hadn't reached me earlier. Now, stories surfaced of night shift nurses hearing disembodied names echoing down empty hallways. Property managers reported security alarms triggered at vacant wards. I met with Nurse Mary Carter, whose hand still shook at the memory. She led me down a corridor once used by Watts. He was always precise, she whispered, showing me a peeling nameplate on a faded door that read, "Night Shift Office." The lock had been replaced weeks ago. Mary said one night she found the door ajar, lights dim, and heard her name. Mary. Mary. Echo softly before receding. I traced my fingers over the scratch marks on the hallway railing. "Did you ever report it?" I asked. She shook her head. Number, I thought I was losing it. Collecting these recollections, I felt the magnitude of what Watts had done. Weaponized trust and familiarity, using names he gleaned from charts to invade the sanctity of home. And now he was reaching out beyond the victims, into the very place that had enabled him. I stepped into the security office, where logs showed multiple keypad entries in the dead hours. Swipe cards used by someone authorized. The last entry was time-stamped 2 nights ago, at 2:45 a.m. The footage from that access point was inexplicably blank for a 10-minute window. The memory of Mrs. Parker's missing second on audio filled my mind. Each technical failure pointed to deliberate sabotage. I compiled the surveillance logs, overlaying them with Watts's known addresses and the new postcard drop sites. A map emerged, a line stretching from the hospital, through the original 5 homes, past Hillcrest and Mobile, and culminating at a cluster of storage lockers on the train yard's edge. I realized the postcards had been mailed from a P.O. box in that same area, likely where my anonymous taunter received them. That evening, with a warrant in hand, I led a small team to those storage units. We moved under cover of darkness, sidearms ready. A light rain fell as we approached a long row of corrugated metal doors, each painted a dull olive. My flashlight swept over rusty locks until I came to Unit 17, the lock fresh and gleaming. I knocked. No answer. Captain Marsh gave the signal to breach. Inside, the stale smell of gasoline and dust hit me. Rows of shelves held cardboard boxes, metal filing cabinets, and, against one wall, a desk strewn with patient charts, backup notebooks, and a stack of unopened postcards identical to the one on my counter. I flicked on my camera. "Evidence," I muttered. I rifled through the files. Birth dates, addresses, medications, charts for dozens of elderly patients. My pulse thundered as I found Evelyn Walsh's discharge summary, annotated in tiny handwriting. Tested, negative response, delayed next call. Under that was Helen Parker's file. Tested, positive, target complete. But then I found something that stopped me cold, a photo pinned above the desk. Officer Sarah Kenny, framed by flashing lights, taken outside Wade's Goodwill 3 months before the first call. My posture was rigid. Next to the photo was a notation. Final test, Sarah K. My breath hitched. It wasn't only Watts who'd orchestrated this. Someone had planned my silence, my fear, my own induction into the nightmare. They wanted me to see my name, hear it whispered, feel the terror of a night shift turned into an experiment. I reached for the radio, voice steady despite the shock. "Captain, you need to see this." My hand trembled as I held up the photograph. Moments later, Captain Marsh and a dozen officers arrived. They locked down the corridors, sealed the area, and moved in to secure the evidence. They found no suspect in the unit. No Gabriel Watts, no silent intruder. Just files, charts, and a final warning aimed at me. As we loaded boxes into evidence vans, I stood in that dusty storage unit, the rain beating a mournful cadence against the metal roof. I realized the horror was far from over. Watts was behind bars, but someone else had taken his blueprint. Someone who knew my routines, my vulnerabilities, and wanted me to understand that no one was truly safe. I left the train yard at dawn, rain streaking my windshield. The sky was a bruised gray, and the postcard fluttered on the passenger seat, mocking me. My gaze drifted to the horizon where the first light threatened to break through. I clenched the steering wheel, heart pounding. My duty was clear. I would end this. No more whispered names, no more manipulated fear. I would find whoever orchestrated this second wave and end their silence for good. But as I drove toward the station, I could still hear it. Sarah, Sarah, echoing in my mind, a promise that the night's secrets would not be laid to rest easily. I spent the morning poring over the evidence from the storage unit. Gabriel Watts's patient charts, the backup notebooks filled with ink-smudged notations, and the stack of identical postcards. Each item whispered the same awful truth. The campaign of terror was authored by more than one hand. Watts was merely the first actor. Now, I was facing an entire conspiracy of silence that extended beyond Dryan's borders. By midday, I convened a small task force in the station's briefing room. Captain Marsh paced in front of the whiteboard, where I'd sketched the timeline. January 2008. First call at Maple Street, Eleanor Walsh. 1 week later, 5 elderly women targeted. 3 days later, Helen Parker call. Weeks later, Daniel Reyes incident. Most recent, movement on Mobile Drive, Holloway's. Now, personal taunt. Sarah K. Postcard. Marsh paused at the final entry. This goes beyond a serial predator, he said. We're dealing with someone who has institutional knowledge, someone who knew your schedule, your patrol routes, and how to pressure you psychologically. I cleared my throat, and I think I know who. My voice was low, but steady. Nurse Mary Carter mentioned that the night shift office door at the hospital had been forced open, lights flickering. She heard her name whispered. That suggests an inside collaborator, someone still at the hospital with access. Lieutenant Roy, our lead cyber investigator, tapped at his tablet. We've traced the postcards to P.O. Box 427 near the rail yard. We cross-checked IP logs from hospital CCTV servers and found multiple logins during Watts's tenure that bypassed the usual firewall, originating from an internal terminal with a generic admin login. Marsh nodded. Who else had access to that account? Roy's fingers flew. Only 2 people, Watts's supervisor, Dr. Evelyn Stone, and the hospital's IT manager, James Holloway. He glanced at me. The name's familiar. Same last name as the Holloways. My heart sank. I'd met Mr. and Mrs. Holloway at the scene. I hadn't noticed his name was James, but the coincidence was too stark. He's not innocent, I said. He lumbered home that night without answering door knocks. His ID badge could have easily accessed the night shift office. Marsh frowned. But why target his own mother? Cover, I said. He planted the postcard in my apartment to shift suspicion away from new collaborators, like a decoy. He's following Watts's template, but with bigger stakes. We moved fast. By afternoon, we had a warrant for James Holloway's arrest and to search his home and hospital office. I double-checked my gear before heading out. Body cam, flashlight, handcuffs, and an unwavering determination to end this. The Colonials on Oakwood Street were pristine. Well-kept lawn, security cameras, and a decorative owl statue perched near the entrance. I knocked on the front door. It opened silently, revealing a spacious foyer lined with distressed wood paneling and family portraits. Mr. Holloway stood in a crisp white shirt, his hands raised but tense. "Officer Kenny," he said quietly. Can I help you?" I showed him the warrant. "We need to search your home for evidence related to multiple counts of conspiracy to commit elder abuse and attempted homicide." His face went slack. "What? What evidence?" "Postcards, patient charts, server logs. You have the right to remain silent." I watched the color drain from his cheeks as officers fanned out, securing foyer, dining room, and hallways. In the study, I found his laptop open on a mahogany desk. The screen displayed a directory labeled Archives Night Shift. I pressed my forehead to the keys and scrolled through subfolders. Patients' codes, operational plans, and subroutine dialogue. In subroutine dialogue, files contained audio clips, recordings of nurses calling shift changes interspersed with a whisper. "Evelyn, Nurse Carter, can you step into the hall?" Below, logs showed timestamps of calls placed from hospital extension to patients' rooms, each file named for a target's code number. I realized Holloway wasn't just reusing Watts's method. He was refining it, integrating hospital telephony to pre-record messages that would play on patients' phones when they answered. The personalization was automated, chillingly efficient. In a locked cabinet, officers found a blood-stained surgical glove and 2 syringes, one empty, one with the residue testers identified as a paralytic agent not normally dispensed in the hospital's formulary. He'd upgraded from sedatives to something more controllable, leaving victims disoriented but alive until he chose otherwise. Under court order, we escorted Holloway to the hospital, where Lieutenant Roy and IT staff cut power to the night shift office terminal. Illuminated monitors revealed his trail, masked logins, deleted CCTV footage, and network packets routing through a personal VPN to hide IP addresses. Marched into the darkened office, Holloway stood framed by the broken nameplate. I watched him, remembering his mother's fear at Mobile Drive. He raised a hand, voice shaking. I did it for control, for recognition. Nobody cared about those people. His eyes were distant, as though he spoke of a prize rather than human lives. We cuffed him and read his rights. As he was escorted out, he hissed, "You'll never stop it." There are others, everywhere. His words lingered in the humming computer fans, filling the empty room with dread. Back at the station, Roy and cyber forensics worked round the clock, purging malware from hospital servers, restoring deleted footage, and auditing user accounts. We published a bulletin, an urgent plea for any hospital staff or family members who'd noticed irregularities in patient interactions. Nurse Carter came forward with more whispers, this time recorded on her own phone, files that matched Holloway's code subroutine dialogue. Each clip was a confession and a clue. Later, I sat in my cruiser, rain pattering on the windshield. The station lights glowed behind me, a beacon of order in chaos. I stared at the stack of patient charts now in evidence, each name a testament to lives nearly erased. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the folded postcard. The footprints on the card were sharper now, almost mocking in their clarity. I crushed it in my hand, letting the edges tear apart. My radio crackled. "Unit 504, Captain Marsh's voice said, soothing. "We've got Holloway in custody. The hospital's secure. You can rest now." I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "Copy that, sir. I'll be in." I took one last look at the charts. Eleanor Walsh, Helen Parker, Daniel Reyes, Evelyn and Robert Holloway, and me, Sarah Kenny. Each name once buried, now unearthed. The days that followed blurred into a haze of debriefings, court transcripts, and press statements. Dryan Regional Medical Center held a vigil for the surviving victims, and police departments nationwide reviewed their protocols. But behind the official statements and the grateful smiles in the station's reception, I carried a quieter burden. The knowledge that the worst whispers in the dark were still those we chose not to record. I returned to the storage unit one last time, now cleared of most evidence but for a single, weathered photograph taped to the corrugated wall. It was the same image of Officer Sarah Kenny, framed by icy footprints, a grotesque souvenir. Taped beneath it was a final note in cramped handwriting. "You broke the pattern." But now the story follows you. My hand trembled as I tore it down and placed it in an evidence bag. The photograph went with it. Whoever orchestrated this conspiracy had known exactly how to push me, shifting from elderly patients to myself, the line blurring between profession and prey. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the weight of the past weeks pressing down like the winter frost outside. A fresh mug of coffee steamed in front of me, but I hadn't the appetite to drink it. I turned over the case files one last time. Watts's notebook, Holloway's charts, the maps I'd drawn in red ink, the breathless testimonies of frightened souls. My thoughts drifted to the larger picture. If Holloway had successors, nurses or staff members who'd watched and learned, a single conviction wasn't enough. We needed systemic change. I resolved to prepare a comprehensive report, not the sanitized version for the public, but the raw truth for the chiefs and commissioners. A file filled with every erased moment, every missing report, every whispered name that had been left in the dark. I typed the cover letter starting, "To whom it may concern, these pages contain what didn't make the headlines." I paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then I printed it out, stacking the 200 pages that would become the most controversial report of my career. I bound it with a black ribbon and took it to Captain Marsh's office. He read in silence, lip pressed tight, eyes flicking up to mine. "You're sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. The public deserves the truth. Force protocols need reform. We can't let names be erased anymore. He closed the folder, handing it back. "I'll deliver it to the chief. You did good, Kenny." I left the station that night under a sky free of rain clouds. The air was cold, but crisp, clean as a fresh start. I walked Maple Street one last time, past the house where it all began. The frost lay untouched on the porch, no footprints, no whispers. I lifted my hand to the front door's knob, memories of Eleanor's trembling voice echoing. He tried the back door. I touched the cold metal and stepped back, feeling the hush of early morning settle around me. No rustling in the bushes, no soft calls of my name, only the stillness of a town waking from its nightmares. I turned toward home, headlights catching the horizon's pale glow. And as I drove away, I realized that the greatest horror wasn't what happened in those silent moments. It was what could happen if we kept quiet about them. And that silence ends today. I pull onto the Highway 41 just past the turnoff for Mercer's Ridge, headlights cutting through the damp December air. Rain drizzles against my windshield, and the road ahead shimmers with fleeting reflections of the county cruiser's rotating light bar. It's nearing midnight, but this stretch of asphalt, as empty as any I've ever patrolled, has always unnerved me. They call it Nowhere Road for a reason. Tonight, I'm Deputy Alex Monroe, and I've been here too many times for my own comfort. At mile marker 12, the faint glow of hazard lights catches my eye. A blue sedan sits angled on the shoulder, engine idling, doors closed but unlocked. It's exactly like the call I got 20 minutes ago. Abandoned vehicle, no sign of driver. I flip on my cruiser's overhead lights, reach for the mic. Unit 12, approaching abandoned vehicle at mile marker 12. Can you confirm plate? The dispatcher's voice crackles. Copy that, 12. Plate shows registered to one Ethan Keller, Atlanta. Reported missing 3 days ago. Vehicle towed, I'll notify dispatch. Ethan Keller, pharmaceutical rep. High flyer. He should have been at a hotel tonight meeting clients. Instead, here he is, engine running, perched on the edge of the unknown. I slip out of the cruiser, boots crunching on wet gravel. My department-issued flashlight flicks on, beam bright and white. The sedan's interior light glows faintly through tinted windows. I circle the car, leaning in to peer inside. Wallet, phone, keys, everything he needs to call for help, lies abandoned on the passenger seat. The windshield wipers stand frozen in mid-swipe. I radio, Unit 12, verifying abandoned. Full gear inside, no driver. I'm checking perimeter. I sweep the light over the dark tree line a dozen yards back. Tall pines stand like silent sentinels in the fog. I step toward them, flashlight in hand, sweeping left to right. The broadcast tower's blinking red light looms overhead, a single point of reference in the haze. No matter how many times I pass this spot, that tower feels like it's watching. A soft crunch from behind makes me pivot. Nothing. Just my own breath, billowing in my face. I lean in close to the car's rear passenger door handle, warm to the touch, like someone just got out. I check the neon sticker on the trunk. Manufacturer date, service records. No mechanical alarm telling me why he stopped. I slip my hand inside the door, expecting motion. Only cold upholstery greets me. My jacket's radio clicks again. Unit 12, do you need backup? Possible missing person on scene. I hesitate. This is protocol. Call for backup anytime a civilian vanishes, especially a known missing person. But I've been doing this long enough to see the routine calls swell the numbers here every decade or so. Negative. I'll stay on location, I reply, voice steady. I'm clear for now. The dispatch doesn't push. Instead, they drop channel. I'm alone. My chest tightens with each beat. I shine the light back at the woods. 40 yards in, I catch movement. A figure slipping behind a tree. I freeze, pulse racing. The shape is tall, too tall for any deer. My training kicks in. I lift my weapon hand to steady the pistol at my side, though I haven't drawn yet. Slowly, I step forward. The shape dissolves into shadow as I slip between trees, boots sinking into wet pine needles. Minutes pass, or maybe seconds. My flashlight's beam bounces over ferns and brambles, narrowing as the undergrowth thickens. The rain has stopped, leaving droplets clinging to branches. I see something awful. A thin, dark thread stretched between two saplings, forming a crude tripwire. I set the beam aside and check beneath me. No footprints here, just soil churned, as if someone knelt before tying that thread. The scribble of something scrawled in mud catches my eye. 4 numbers, 1974. A date burned into the forest floor, though the trees have grown around it. My heart lurches. That date predates any records for this county's disappearances. I step back, stumbling, my mind racing to connect Keller, the missing rep, and the 4 decades of vanishings along this road. I radio in. Unit 12 to dispatch. Possible booby trap. Crew needs to secure perimeter. Advise K9 unit if available. No answer. Dead channel. I slam the feed and switch to the sheriff's muted group. Anyone copy? Monroe's on 41. Possible tripwire. Stand by. The wet earth beneath my boot squeaks. I spin toward what sounded like a branch snapping. Between the trees, I make out the faint outline of a battered blue sedan. A different one, parked deeper in the woods. Blinkers off, doors closed, and a single hazard reflector propped on the roof. I approach cautiously, mind on overload. Running the plate yields nothing. The dash cam batteries are dead. Someone removed them. The tag is missing. It's the same setup in 10 cases. Driver vanishes, doors left unlocked, no sign of violence, no footprints leading away. Just the car, just the silence. My breath hitches as I dare a peek inside. The seats are blanketed with personal items. A photograph of a smiling couple, a driver's license, a business card, none matching Ethan Keller's. Names I haven't seen flagged. I lean in to read the card. Lydia Marshall, Washington, D.C., Smithsonian Museum of History. A chill spirals upward. Keller's GPS plotted points in the ocean. Here, another stranger's life left like an offering to the woods. I stretch out my hand, fingertips grazing the photo under a light sheen of condensation. Lydia, mid-30s, eyes wide with wonder. Her lipstick smudge on the glass, as though she kissed it seconds before vanishing. Lightning flickers in the distance, the sky roaring with thunder. The clouds swirl as if alive, wind dancing through treetops. My radio bursts to life. Unit 12, back up en route. I exhale, tension easing only slightly. I place one hand on the car's roof, another on my pepper spray, and prepare to call in a full search. Whatever this is, Watts's twisted blueprint writ large, a decades-old pattern, I'm standing at its heart. I radio out, dispatch 12 to base. Confirm K9 response and air support. We've got multiple vehicles, multiple targets. This isn't a coincidence. Pattern emerging. Dozens missing since the 70s. I'm initiating full-scale search. The rain returns in earnest, drumming a frantic rhythm on the sedan's roof. Jungle darkness closes in 360 degrees around me. I tighten the grip on my flashlight and step forward. My cruiser's lights flash in the rearview mirror, my lone beacon in the storm. I swallow the knot in my throat and steel myself. Because out here, on Nowhere Road, the line between reality and something else wears thin, and I've just stepped across it. By the time I radioed dispatch, my stomach was knotted tighter than my duty belt. The thunder rolled over the pines like distant drums, and the rain hammered the roof of the mysterious sedan. I slammed the door shut, careful not to leave my own prints beside the stranger's belongings. The cruiser's lights cast long, wavering shadows across the roadside clearing, a fragile barrier between me and the depths of that silent forest. Unit 12, I called, voice brittle. I need canine support and air units. Multiple abandoned vehicles, each with personal items inside. We're dealing with a pattern. Vehicles left running, no driver, no sign of struggle. It spans decades. Static crackled in response. Copy, 12K9 en route, helicopter ETA 10 minutes. Stay safe. I took a breath and crouched beside the sedan. I needed to document everything. My flashlight illuminated the spread of items on the back seat. A well-worn leather satchel, a folded letter sealed with a wax crest, and a single glove, child-sized, lying atop a pile of brochures for the Smithsonian. I snapped photos on my phone, careful to capture every angle, the glove's stitching, the letter's seal, the way the brochure's glossy cover reflected the flashlight beam. The letter lay unopened. Curiosity gnawed at me, but protocol forbade tampering with potential evidence. One glance at the wax crest, an intertwined M and C, told me it belonged to someone important. Maybe that family would file a missing persons report. Maybe they'd already, and this was part of the pattern. A movement behind me made me whirl around. Nothing, just swaying branches. My radio crackled again. Unit 12, helicopter overhead. I'm passing coordinates. Stand by for thermal scan. I tapped my shoulder mic. Copy, dispatch, I'm marking vehicle locations now. I reached for an orange evidence marker and placed it beside the sedan's driver's side mirror. 2A. Then I stepped back and shone the light on the surrounding ground. No other prints, just the two sets leading to and from the vehicle, vanishing into the darkness, swallowed by the rain-slicked underbrush. The whop, whop, whop of rotor blades cut through the storm, and I watched the searchlight from above slice through the trees, illuminating me in a pale, wobbling circle. I waved my flashlight, Position confirmed. A voice from the helicopter crackled through my radio. Monroe, we've got heat signatures moving through Sector 12B, about 200 yards northeast. Looks like two people walking side by side. My heart slammed against my ribs. Two silhouettes, footprints side by side, trailing into the forest. Not random wanderers, someone traveling together under the cover of night. I keyed my mic. Unit 12 to dispatch. Two targets moving through the woods. I'm heading in on foot. K9, meet me at the clearing. I holstered my pistol but kept my taser ready. The risk of approaching unknown individuals in a storm-soaked forest was massive. In my peripheral vision, the edge of the sedan blurred with rain. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and advanced toward the brush, every sense alert. The first 50 yards were uneventful. Slick leaves, shallow puddles, the sound of rain dripping through the canopy. Then, as I neared the spot marked by the helicopter's beam, I noticed something odd. Dozens of small round indentations in the mud, each the size of a quarter, arranged in concentric circles. I knelt, shining my beam across them. They formed no pattern I recognized, no animal tracks or human prints. Just depressions like someone had pressed coins into the earth in an intricate design. I rose, unease crawling up my spine. Something about the formation suggested ritual. But what kind of ritual involved coins and empty silence on a deadly stretch of highway? I pressed on, guided by the thermal blips on my handheld unit. The trees parted, revealing a narrow game trail heading deeper into the woods. I followed, stepping lightly to avoid twisting an ankle in the darkness. The beam caught on something reflective ahead. A broken police badge, its insignia cracked at the eagle's head. I froze, staring at the name etched beneath. Forrester. Deputy James Forrester, missing since 2003. My pulse thundered. I crouched and picked it up, letting the badge dangle from my fingers. It was warm, recently carried, not a relic lost to time. My radio crackled again, dispatch's voice tense. Monroe, backup's approaching on foot. Unit 14 is 2 minutes out. Watch your 6. I slid the badge into an evidence bag. Copy that, I whispered. I've got something here. Need forensic team? Print this. As I turned, a low hum began, like distant machinery throbbing in my ears. I raised the flashlight. Through the trees, a dull line of amber light, like a forgotten road, appeared between trunks. It wasn't on any map. The thermal unit flashed white-hot. At least 4 figures stood there, motionless. They weren't moving toward me. They were waiting. I radioed, "Dispatch, do you copy? I'm reading 4 heat signatures at the edge of the clearing. No movement. Do not send K9 or backup yet. I need eyes on those." There was a pause, broken by static, then, "Copy, 12, hold position." The rain intensified. A curtain of silver between me and the silhouettes. My breath was loud in my ears. The hood of my jacket stuck to the back of my neck as the forest exhaled around me. I edged closer, mind racing with possibilities. Who else had a badge in that clearing? Who else carried coils of wax seals and tripwires? How many had vanished along this corridor before someone finally noticed the pattern? I squared my shoulders and advanced another 10 feet, then halted. The figures had moved closer. I could make out the curve of a hat, the slash of a uniform's pocket, the glimmer of a badge on one chest. A second later, the amber lights flickered and died, swallowed by the black. I was alone again, except for the rain, the trees, and the remnants of a mystery stretching back more than 40 years. My flashlight flickered and died. I jerked it, clicked it back to life. And there, a foot from mine, was a handprint pressed into the mud, larger than any man's, but slender, bony, and cold. Night fell deeper as I lingered at the forest's edge, the cracked badge of a deputy forester burning a hole in my pocket. The rain washed our footprints away, but the air still held their echo, those long-vanished souls who had answered a name in the dark and never returned. My radio whispered that Unit 14 was 3 minutes out, but I held back, eyes fixed on the narrowing path illuminated only by sporadic helicopter beams overhead. I slipped the badge into a Ziploc evidence pouch, careful to seal it with minimal disturbance, then tucked it into my chest pocket. My breath fogged the air as I exhaled. The forest seemed to shift around me, trees leaning closer, wind sighing through needles like hushed warnings. I double-checked my flashlight. Batteries were low, but enough. I clipped an extra set to my belt and eased forward down the narrow trail. The amber lights had gone out, but I still felt their presence. 4 figures, still, hidden just beyond sight. As I pressed on, the ground shifted beneath my boots. I caught a glimpse of a glint, a reflective sergeant's chevron pinned to a low branch. I snapped it off and examined it. Sergeant L. Morris, a name from another missing person file, decades old. The forest was an archive of lost officers and civilians both, each totem a silent testament to their disappearance. My radio crackled, but I ignored it. The real story lay ahead. The dropped chevron's polished brass had no dirt on it. Too clean, as if placed deliberately. I flicked it into my evidence bag. Up ahead, the trail opened into a clearing, drenched in moonlight and mist. The helicopter's searchlight swept past, revealing 4 dark shapes standing like sentinels. I crouched behind a fallen log and strained to see. Each figure wore a different uniform: police, EMT, hospital scrubs, fire department patch. They were arranged in a loose semicircle around a ramshackle wooden shrine, assembled from driftwood, branches, and discarded license plates. At its center lay a battered suitcase, latch broken, contents spilled, a patrol hat, a nurse's cap, a firefighter's helmet, and a single child's toy truck. Rainwater pooled around the shrine, reflecting shards of moonlight. My heart pounded as one figure stepped forward, uniformed in an old-style patrol jacket, badge gleaming. The face was pale, eyes distant. "Deputy Monroe," the voice rasped, disembodied and reverberating. "You came for us." He raised a gloved hand and pointed to the suitcase. "Take our markers, add your name so the pattern continues." My blood ran cold. The suitcase contained small rectangular tags, each stamped with a name and date of disappearance. J. Forrester, December 7th, 2003. E. Keller, December 4th, 2003. L. Marshall, November 29th, 2017. D. Reyes, February 12th, 2008. R. Holloway, January 22nd, 2010. And at the bottom, blank tags labeled A. Monroe. The next moment, the helicopter beam swept into view, illuminating the shrine, and the figures vanished. The clearing was empty, save for the rain-drenched shrine and the suitcase tags fluttering in the breeze like dark butterflies. My flashlight flickered off in my hand, plunging me into thick, choking blackness. I fumbled, clicked it back on. The path behind me looked gone. Trees and brush closed the trail as though it had never existed. My radio crackled insistently in my pocket. The K-9 team had arrived, voices calling my name, paws scratching at undergrowth. But I couldn't move. My limbs wouldn't obey. Finally, I forced a step forward. The suitcase sat open at the shrine's base, tags scattered. I bent and retrieved the blank tag labeled for me. My fingers trembled as I wrote in black, permanent ink. A. Monroe, December 15th, 2023. and pressed it into the metal latch. The tag clicked into place, sealing shut the suitcase as though I had bound myself to the same fate. A distant howl echoed through the trees, part canine, part human. The air resonated with it, a lament of lost voices. My flashlight flickered for the last time, then died. I raised my hand, groping for my radio, but found only the tag. My pistol felt heavy at my waist. When the K9 team burst into the clearing moments later, I was alone. No sign of the shrine, the suitcase, or the tags. Only the crashed remnants of driftwood and fallen needles. The rain had washed away everything but the echo in my mind. 4 figures, beckoning, lost between worlds. I radioed in, Unit 12, be advised, I've lost visuals on evidence site. No shrine, no markers, no sir, nothing but the clearing. My voice sounded hollow. Dispatch answered coldly, copy that, 12. Investigate anomalies later. Focus on finding Monroe. I forced a nod in the darkness, though no one saw it. I followed the ferret lines of the K9s back to the cruiser, clutching the blank tag in my hand, its inscription smudged with rain, but still legible. The dog handlers led me out as the helicopter reconvened overhead. Back at the station, I placed the tag on the evidence locker, under lock and seal. My reflection in the locker door stared back at me, wide-eyed, drained. Captain Marsh met me there, face pale. What happened? I handed him the tag. It's real, it's all real. My voice cracked. And they're not done. He nodded gravely. We'll lock this up, and we'll warn the State Patrol. You're not going alone. I exhaled, body trembling. Outside, the wind whipped rain against the windows. I stared at the tag. A. Monroe, December 15th, 2023. The pattern had taken me in, adding my name to a roster of the vanished. And if I didn't break it, if I didn't somehow stop answering the call, I would be next. I spent the morning showering off the damp chill in my bones, but the cold seemed to seep into my marrow. The evidence locker's steel door closed with a hollow clank that reverberated through the station's corridors. No one asked where I'd been. They knew better than to press. Not after Nowhere Road. By mid-afternoon, my desk was buried under reports. Missing persons files, vehicle towing logs, dispatch transcripts, and the scratchy pages of the anonymous tip that first unearthed Watts's medical exploitation. I pored over each one, searching for a lead, something that explained the shrine and the suitcase tags. Nothing, except the dates, evenly spaced, cyclical, matching every 7 years. 1974, 1981, 1988, 1995, 2002, 2009, 2016, and now 2023. Each cycle swallowed souls in the dead of winter. The realization settled like lead. Today's date, December 15, 2023, marked exactly 49 years since the first documented vanishings. 7-year cycles, matches every odd multiple of 7 since 1974. The pattern was as rigid as gravity, and with my name scrawled on that tag, I was bound to the same calendar. I stood and grabbed my coat. I needed fresh air, needed to escape the stifling hum of fluorescent lights and whispered rumors. Outside, the storm had cleared, but left a frosted world behind. The blacktop glowed with ice crystals, and stars peeked through a thinning haze. I slipped into my cruiser, started the engine, and turned on the heater, warming my hands on the steering wheel. I keyed the radio. Unit 12, moving to Nowhere Road for a second sweep. I want thermal scans and K9 on standby. The dispatcher hesitated, then replied, Copy 12. You're on your own for now. Backups tied up. I exhaled, blinking fog from the windshield. I drove back along the stretch of Highway 41 with trepidation knotting my gut. Each mile marker felt like another heartbeat counting down. The road was deserted. No abandoned vehicles, no flickering hazards, just the smooth ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dark pines. At mile marker 12, I slowed. The scene was bare, no sedan, no shrine, but the air felt charged as though someone had just passed. I shut off the engine, leaned back, and watched the stars. Then, soft and almost melodic, came the whisper, "Deputy, deputy." It floated through the cruiser's cabin, coming from the woods beyond my passenger window. I sat up straight, hand on the door frame, breath shallow. My flashlight lay on the passenger seat, useless in a closed car. I risked opening the door. The cold air snatched at my face, but the whisper stopped. Outside, the forest was still. I stepped onto the ground, crunching ice underfoot. I waved my arms, scanning with the cruiser's spotlight. Nothing. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw footprints glinting in the frost, 7 sets, stretching from the shoulder into the woods. Each set belonged to a different pair of shoes. Heavy work boots, woman's high heels, a paramedic's rubber clogs. They formed an unbroken line leading deeper into the trees, then vanished at the edge of a knoll. I followed. The footprints led upward, where the earth crumbled into a shallow sinkhole, like the ground had swallowed itself. At the bottom lay shards of glass, broken headlight fragments, a cracked side mirror, shards of metal. I knelt to examine them. Familiar patterns from Chrysler, Ford, Chevy, non-industrial. Each piece matched a vehicle make found abandoned here over the years. I radioed in, voice urgent. Unit 12. Evidence of multiple vehicle fragments at sinkhole. Coordinates sent. Request immediate backup. Static hissed, then Unit 12. Backup en route. ETA 5 minutes. I rummaged through my coat pocket and found the tag. A. Monroe, December 15th, 2023. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the cold metal bite through my glove. The inscription shimmered in the spotlight. I snapped it back into an evidence pouch. Above me, the helicopter light swept the canopy edge. I followed its beam, caught 7 pairs of white-hot eyes perched in the trees, watching. They flicked away before I could focus. My heart pounded. Time slowed. I took a slow, steadying breath and called out, "I know you're there. Show yourself." The only response was the wind in the pines and the distant hum of a motor, 2 motors, then 3. I bolted toward the sound, flashlight leading the way. The sinkhole's edge crumbled beneath me. I slipped, caught myself with one hand, and peered into the darkness below. Inside the pit, 7 discarded badges lay in a circle, tarnished and frozen. A mix of sheriff's deputies, state troopers, and municipal officers. Some dates dating back to the late 70s. In the center, a weathered photograph of a smiling child stood propped against a standing rock. A boy holding a toy truck, identical to the one I saw in the forest shrine. My pulse thundered. I whispered, "What did you do to them?" No answer, only the echo of dripping water. Then, faint footsteps above. My head snapped up. The footprints on the ridge. 7 sets again, inching around the sinkhole's rim. They paused at the edge. I shined the light upward. A shadow fell across the lens. Tall, slender, impossibly still. My radio crackled again, back up close, but the feed was drowned by another whisper. We feared the flooding. Flooding. I realized the sinkhole had once been a spring. A natural well that locals long ago filled in, resurfacing the road. The original disappearances in 1974 had been attributed to sinkhole collapses, but never fully explained. Now I understood. They returned every 7 years, calling each new name, circled by voices they never silenced. The ridge darkened as the figure leaned forward, and in that moment the world stilled. Wind dropped, rain returned in a cold breath. I stood on the edge of the hole, heart lodged in my throat. Footsteps continued around the rim, 7, 8, 9, each a name, each a story, mine the last. Then the shadows receded. The engine of the backup cruiser grew louder. I turned to see headlights crest the road. I backed away from the sinkhole, hands raised, the tags and badges clinking in my pocket. Headlights flooded the clearing, and I shouted, "Get back! Stay clear of the edge!" Officers poured out, flashlights slicing the darkness. They fanned out, saw the badges, saw the fragments, saw my panic-wide eyes. The helicopter circled above, its searchlight beam ripping through the trees. When they finally pulled me away, the stream of whoosh from the copter drowned everything else. I looked back, but the pit was gone, sealed over by shifting earth, brambles, and mist. At the station later, Captain's office door closed behind me. He held the photo of the boy and the badges, eyes heavy. "Monroe, did you see anything alive?" I swallowed, voice breaking. "No, sir, just their markers, their calling cards." He nodded, placing the photo and badges in an evidence box. "We'll secure this, and we'll issue a warning. No one patrols Nowhere Road alone." I stepped outside into the dawn's pale light. Frost cracking beneath my boots, I walked a mile marker back, watching the empty asphalt stretch on. No shrine anymore. But I carried their voices in my mind, whispers echoing across decades. Monroe, Monroe, the cycle continues. The sun had barely risen by the time I returned home. My bones ached from the night's ordeal, and I felt hollow, like the forest had carved something out of me and left me raw. In the shower, I scrubbed at imagined grime, but the ache remained beneath my skin. I dressed slowly, the weight of my duty belt feeling heavier than ever. At the station, an urgent bulletin awaited. All units, immediate briefing in Chief's office at 0900 hours. Nowhere Road classified as high risk. No solo patrols. I nodded to Sergeant Vega as I passed. She gave me a solemn look, as if she'd already heard the whispers. I followed the corridor to the Chief's conference room, where every detective and shift supervisor gathered. Chief Anderson stood at the head of the table, tapping a stack of photos onto the polished wood. "Deputy Monroe has uncovered a pattern dating back nearly 50 years, he announced. "Abandoned vehicles, missing drivers, and now evidence of ritual markers tied to a 7-year cycle." He gestured to me. "Alex, walk them through what you found." I swallowed, cleared my throat, and described the sinkhole shrine, the badges, the photograph of the child, and the whispered warning. Murmurs rippled through the room. The chief held up the boy's photo. "Any ID on this child?" "No," I replied. "No case file, no missing person report, no record of him anywhere." I added, "But his toy truck matches one found in Isabel Lang's abandoned SUV in 1988, her file marked as a voluntary disappearance." Detective Morales leaned forward. "Lang, she was 42, archaeologist. Vanished after logging GPS coordinates in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No sign of struggle." She frowned. "So, this child's image has surfaced at multiple sites over the decades?" "Every cycle, yes," I confirmed. "His presence may be an omen or focal point. Each shrine includes his photo and a toy truck." Chief Anderson tapped the photo. "This is where we draw the line. We secure any evidence, increase patrols during cycle dates, and treat Nowhere Road as a no-patrol zone without at least 4 officers in K-9 backup." He turned to me. "You'll coordinate with state police?" Park Services and Hospital Security. We'll form a multi-agency task force. I nodded. Understood, sir. Outside the briefing room, I paused. Sergeant Vega caught up. What do you need? She asked quietly. Every scrap of history on these disappearances, I said. Reports, photos, even folklore. Any detail that can help us understand what we're up against. She gave a determined nod. I'll pull everything. That afternoon, I sat in the records vault, sifting through musty files dating back to 1974. Each missing person report read like a ghost story. Vanished from nowhere road, vehicle running, no signs of foul play. Women, men, even 2 Boy Scouts on a cross-country trip. Each file ended with no leads. Next, I scanned newspaper archives. Small-town papers printed brief notices. Local man missing, authorities baffled, case remains open. Few photos, less than a paragraph. But one article from 1995 stood out. A handwritten editor's note. Residents believe the road is cursed. Some swear they hear whispers in the fog. Below it, a letter from a reader. My sister vanished here. She called my name. I thought it was her voice. I still listened for it. I leaned back, eyes stinging. People who vanished began as victims, then became legends. And now I was part of that legend. That night, I convened the task force at Nowhere Road's patrol staging area. 15 officers, 2 K-9 units, and a state police detective stood in the frozen air. The hospital liaison and a park ranger waited in a command van loaded with radio equipment and mapping tech. I cleared my throat. We operate in teams of 4. Always move together. Thermal sweeps every half hour. Any unusual markers, coins, threads, badges, collect and bag immediately. No touching unlabeled artifacts. The ranger clicked her pen. We'll set up motion-activated cameras along the forest edge. The detective added, I'll liaise with cyber to check for unmarked government vehicles in the county garage records. A drill-edge tension hummed under the orders. We split into teams and fanned out along the corridor. I took point with Sergeant Vega, K-9 unit ready, cruiser parked with flashers on for standby. The rain returned lightly, a veil that blurred the tree line into a shifting wall of gray. At 2010, we discovered fresh chalk circles drawn on the pavement. 5 sets of concentric rings, each marked with numbers. 1974, 1981, 1988, 1995, Iki-Biniki. My heart thundered. The pattern was etched in chalk. Someone had prepared these sites in advance. I radioed evidence markers at MM10, concentric circles labeled. Possibly ritual sites, forensics to grid mark. Sergeant Vega holstered her shotgun. I'll call it in. The night deepened as we continued patrol. No disappearances tonight, no shrines. But the night belonged to those lost, and in those silent woods I heard echoes. Monroe. Monroe. A reminder that the cycle continued. And only by confronting it head-on could we hope to break its deadly rhythm. The crisp wind of early morning whipped through the makeshift command post, rattling the satellite dishes atop the command van. My eyes stung from lack of sleep, but there was no room for fatigue. The task force was in full operation mode. Screens glowed with camera feeds, mapping, data, and thermal sweeps, while the K-9 handlers refreshed their dogs before the next shift. I scribbled notes furiously in my field notebook, layering new observations atop the decades of disappearances I'd cataloged. Sergeant Vega approached, breath visible in the cold air. We have something. She pointed to the central monitor, thermal signatures flickering in Sector 12C, exactly where our chalk circles at mile marker 13 intersected with an old service road. 4 heat spots moving slowly, forming a loose diamond as if circling an unseen object. I grabbed the mic. All units, converge on Sector 12C. Maintain formation and stay back from chalk circles. The responses came briskly. Vehicle engines revving, radios clicking. In minutes, I joined 2 state troopers, a park ranger, and a K-9 team, boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. We descended a narrow embankment to reach the service road, flashlights crisscrossing the black. The chalk circles lay upon the ground, faded now from the wind, but still visible under our beams. In the center, the earth had been scraped away, leaving a shallow pit about 4 feet across. Inside, more coin indentations, quarters, dimes, pennies, pressed into the damp soil in spirals. I knelt to examine them. Some bore dates: 1988, 1995, 2002, 2009, 2016. My pulse throbbed at the familiarity. The thermal readings pulse-streaked across my scope. 4 figures standing just beyond the pit, almost invisible in the darkness. I signaled the K-9 handler. The dog, a black German shepherd named Hera, released from her handler's grip and bounded toward the first thermal blip, sniffing the air. She stopped at the edge of the circle, head tilting. Her tail flagged rhythmically. 1, 2, 3, 4, I murmured. All there. The figures, still as statues, remained just outside the circle. I felt a prickle at the nape of my neck. The particles of breath froze before me as I exhaled. I raised my radio. Dispatch, we have 4 figures approximately 50 yards from the pit. K-9 indicates human scent. No sign of life, but heat signature persists. Proceed with caution. I took a step forward and felt the ground tremble. A low vibration, as if something ancient stirred beneath us. I ordered the troopers to fan out, drawing sidearms. The ranger snapped a photo of the pit, his fingers trembling. Above us, my helicopter partner circle turned, spotlight slicing through the wood. The figures flickered under the beam, blurred, then vanished. With a sharp bark, Hera lunged toward the pit, barking urgently. I swung my light around and saw tiny boots, children's boots, lining the edge of the circle, each imprinted in the soil. They led away into the woods, following the service road. But these prints were fresh, too fresh, imprint edges crisp in the dirt. I followed the dog's lead, stepping carefully to avoid disrupting the older coin indentations. The footprints guided us past ferns and bramble, until we reached a clearing on a gentle hillside overlooking the highway. There, 4 children stood hand in hand in a circle, backs to us, heads bowed, still silent. Each wore period-appropriate clothing that shifted with the beam. A brown wool coat from the 1970s, a plaid jacket from the 80s, a raincoat from the 90s, and a modern hoodie bearing the Smithsonian seal. I raised my voice, pistol drawn but not aimed. "Police, do not move." The children remained motionless, unresponsive. I edged closer, breath catching. In the center of their circle rested a small replica of the shrine I'd seen near the forest shrine. Driftwood, license plates, and a child's truck toy. It was a miniature of the larger shrine, perfect in detail, yet tiny in scale. My radio crackled. "Monroe, backup arriving. Are you okay?" I knelt by the shrine, careful not to touch anything. I retrieved a tiny badge, so small it fit in the palm of my hand, engraved with Junior Deputy. Beneath, the date, 1974. I realized that each era had its representative. A child to symbolize innocence lost at each cycle. The letters on the toy truck were nearly illegible, but I could make out E. Keller scratched on the chassis. Ethan Keller again. A sharp gust of wind slapped across the clearing. The 4 children slowly raised their heads in unison, revealing featureless faces, smooth, pale, devoid of eyes, mouth, or expression. My breath caught in a single moment of paralyzing dread. The children unlinked hands and took a single step toward me, boots crunching the frosted grass. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. Hira barked. The other K-9 units snarled. The children advanced as one, silent and resolute. I radioed, voice shaking. "Dispatch, do you copy?" I have miners, unresponsive miners, advancing toward position. Request immediate extraction. Static answered me. Just then, the hillside behind me exploded with lights and shouts as state troopers surged in, weapons drawn. The children froze, the force of the arriving units cutting into the supernatural tableau. I spun, backing toward the service road. When I looked again, the children, the shrine, the coin circles, everything had vanished. The clearing was empty, save for the small trodden circle in the grass and a single-inch tall badge lying face down. I pocketed the badge, unseeing, and signaled the team. We secured and photographed the explosives. Nothing explosive, only the uncanny emptiness. The troopers scanned the woods. Helicopters circled close. Nothing moved but the blades and the crisp wind. Back at the command post, I placed the tiny badge in an evidence envelope and sealed it in a box labeled Cycle Site 12C. My hands shook with adrenaline and something deeper, terror at what these cycles demanded. If children symbolized innocence, and the next cycle required another to fill the blank, the aftermath of the child apparition left the task force reeling. Officers whispered in clusters, glancing over shoulders as though the next cycle might materialize at any moment. The command van felt stifling, its walls closing in like the forest itself. I slipped the miniature Junior Deputy 1974 badge into a small evidence safe, the drawer locking with a decisive click. Yet none of it felt contained. Chief Anderson called an impromptu debrief. The room was tense. Maps dotted with evidence markers, printouts of thermal images, and a wall of worn case files served as grim reminders of our findings. We had 7 full sections of ritual sites. 5 original victims, the Holloways, Daniel Reyes, and now me, and each ritual circle revealed deeper layers of history. Now, the children. He looked to me, eyes weary. "Monroe, you and Vega will lead reconnaissance at dawn, but this time we expand our scope. We'll open the road for civilian travel, only under strict convoy. We'll set up mobile cameras and get special ops to surveil the forest's edge." His voice hitched. "We can't keep this quiet forever." I met Vega's gaze. She nodded firmly. We both knew that containment was only temporary. The cycle demanded more. My cruiser rolled slowly behind an armored SUV from the state police. 4 civilian vehicles, each carrying 2 officers, followed in convoy. Their headlights carved bright corridors through the pre-dawn gloom. The air was frigid, each breath crystallizing in the cabin. I radioed dispatch. "Convoy en route. Cameras are online, all clear." A row of portable thermal cameras blinked at the forest line, linked wirelessly to the command van. We passed the first 3 markers, no movement. The 4th, 5th, 6th, each circle was clean. Then, at mile marker 12.5, one camera registered a flicker, a small heat signature darting between trees. I tapped Vega's shoulder. Thermal 12C just lit up. Inside the forest, a team of special ops moved silently toward the reading, night vision goggles scanning. My blood ran cold as the image on my HUD faded. We lost signal. I radioed, "Ops team lost feed, stand by." Static, no reply. I stepped out of the cruiser, arms raised, signaling the convoy to halt. Rain began, a soft patter that blurred vision and cloaked sound. I donned my tactical rain gear and checked my sidearm. Vega did the same. We checked our lights, all in working order. The convoy engines idled behind us, metal beasts waiting in silence. The forest loomed ahead, as if breathing against the headlights. I led Vega into the trees. The path had been swept clean by operators, no coins, no tripwires. But I stayed alert for the faintest disturbance. My radio beeped. Monroe, echo from 12C, whispers at -20 decibels. It was dispatch, but the tone was clinical, detached. We advise extraction. I ignored it. The cycle needed braking, not surrender. I pressed on, boots sinking into moss. The forest floor felt soft, alive. Then I saw them, 7 footprints leading uphill, the depth of each print uneven, some shallow, some deep, as though the weight of the walker shifted with each step. The steps led to the crest of a low rise, beyond which now lay a freshly carved shrine, this time made of glistening metal plates and shards of mirror, reflecting the convoy's lights like 1,000 eyes. At its center, a single, full-sized patrol car hubcap lay, emblazoned with my badge number. Beside it, a new tag. A. Monroe, December 15th, 2030. The date, 7 years in the future. I swallowed hard, heart pounding. The metal plates around the hubcap were engraved with names: Forrester, Keller, Marshall, Reyes, Parker, Holloway, and mine. Beneath each, a date matching disappearance cycles. And at the bottom, an empty slot reading 2030. I felt Vega's hand on my shoulder, steadying. Behind me, the convoy watched through flashlights, cameras, and scopes. The young FBI liaison stepped forward, eyes wide. "This is a prophecy," he whispered. A crack of thunder rattled the mirrored shrine. The forest darkness seemed to warp, and from every reflective surface I saw flashes. Faces of the missing caught in the mirrors, eyes pleading, mouths open in silent screams. My own reflection shimmered, distorted by rain droplets. I raised my radio. "All units, stand down. Evacuate the perimeter now." My voice echoed, but the rain stifled it. The convoy drivers revved engines and reversed, lights flashing. In the hubcap's reflection, I saw movement, shadowy figures stepping out from the trees, forming a circle around the shrine. Vega drew her weapon. I drew mine. We stood back to back in the muddy clearing, surrounded. Then, a voice, a chorus of whispers, undulated around us. We waited. We were lost. We were forgotten. Now, we remember. The voices rose, swirling in the air like a storm. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the faces of the figures. Each one, the child, the patient, the officer, faces empty, soulless, and yearning. Their forms flickered and then coalesced into one tall, gaunt figure draped in a tattered uniform that blended all eras. It extended a skeletal hand toward me. "Your name is written," it hissed, voice merging hundreds of echoes. "Your time is set. Do not resist." I felt Vega's breath behind me as the special ops team formed a line. "Move back," I yelled, and we retreated, slipping, sliding in the mud, trampling roots and shards of mirror. The mirrored shrine fractured in the chaos, shards scattering like falling stars. In that moment, as we reached the tree line, I slammed my boot into the hubcap. Beyond its reflection lay only mud. It cracked loudly. The figure recoiled, features dissolving into fog. The footsteps behind me stepped back. The whispered chorus faded, leaving only the rain's patter and a single, hollow laugh. We ran to the convoy. Engines roared, headlights blinded the forest, and we sped away. The rain washed the shrine's remnants, but I could still feel its weight in the hubcap's crack and the echo of the date etched in my mind. I remember the hum of the cruiser's engine on that warm April night in 1984 as if it were yesterday. I was Officer Mark Dalton, fresh out of the academy, settling into my first shift in Huntington, Illinois. The department was smaller then, just a handful of patrol cars and a tight-knit crew. Crime was low, and folks here still tipped their hats when you nodded in greeting. My training felt real beneath the uniform, but nothing could prepare me for the call that changed everything. It was just past 11 p.m. when dispatch crackled through the radio. Unit 5, report of suspicious activity at 17 Ridgewood Lane. Homeowner reported possible prowler. Check and advise. Ridgewood Lane was the affluent enclave, large lawns, gated entrances, upscale security systems. I toggled the siren to lights only and turned onto the boulevard, palms on the wheel slick with sweat. My partner, Officer Leah Simmons, sat in the passenger seat reviewing our patrol log. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "All quiet," she said quietly, tapping her pad. "Except for the fancy houses," I replied, voice light. "Let's keep it that way." We arrived at 17 Ridgewood Lane, an elegant colonial with white columns and manicured hedges. The driveway was empty, but the front porch light blazed like a beacon. Leah jumped out, flashlight in hand. I followed, boots sinking into the damp grass. The front door was closed, locked. Inside, a voice on the porch intercom called out, "Officer, over here, please hurry." Mr. and Mrs. Hargrave, a retired judge and his wife, peered from the threshold. She clutched a decorative throw pillow as though it were an infant. "We heard footsteps in the attic," she whispered, voice trembling. "And I thought I heard him say my name, Marjorie." I nodded, professional mask in place, though my heart thudded. I scanned the yard, then the roof line. No footprints, no ladder, no broken glass. The attic access was internal, through a trapdoor in the hallway ceiling. I motioned Leah to follow. We flipped open the hatch, climbed the narrow stairs, and flicked on headlamps. The attic was a cathedral of rafters, dust motes drifting in the beam. Boxes of Christmas decorations and old photo albums lined the walls. Nothing moved, nothing sounded. Then Leah hissed, "Mark, footprints." We both froze. In the thin layer of dust, a single set of shoe prints led across the floorboards. Size 10, deep tread, then vanished into the insulation. No exit was visible. We cleared the attic without finding an intruder. The Hargraves insisted they'd heard him. We logged it as unidentified intruder, no evidence. I left a patrol car idling in the drive and promised increased coverage. For weeks, Ridgewood Lane bustled with home security installations. Cameras, motion sensors, safeguard solutions, yard signs sprouted like weeds. Thomas Warren, our new recruit, oversaw it, charming residents with his steady gaze and confident assurance. He recommended specific packages, waved off concerns of cost. "Trust me," he said, voice calm as a lullaby. "This will keep you safe." I worked alongside Warren during those nights. He wore the uniform like armor, moving with purpose. At community meetings, he spoke about crime prevention, smiled for the camera under the headline, "Our Newest Guardian of Ridgewood." Then, one fateful evening in July, I responded to another call. Stolen jewelry from the Buchanan estate, just 2 blocks away. I arrived to find Warren filling out the report. A young man, Michael Carilli, handcuffed on the lawn. He matched the suspect description, Warren told me, voice unwavering. I saw him running from the rear window with Mrs. Buchanan's pearls. Carilli claimed he'd been at his girlfriend's later that night. She corroborated his alibi, proof captured on security video at her home. But Warren's testimony carried weight. Carolee was booked and jailed. The break-in ceased entirely. Ridgewood Lane slept easy once more. Still, Detective Sandra Reeves, fresh back from medical leave, felt the tremor beneath the calm. She pointed out minor anomalies, report timestamps off by minutes, canvas logs indicating Warren's cruiser was elsewhere when he claimed to be at a scene. I brushed them aside, too trusting of the badge. But Sandra kept digging, her instincts sharpening on something that stank of betrayal. I spent the next day in a haze of paperwork and unease. Detective Reeves's suspicions gnawed at me like a stubborn toothache. Though I'd brushed off her concerns, I couldn't shake the nagging questions. Why did Officer Warren's cruiser show different GPS coordinates than the dispatch logs? How did he always arrive first, no matter how distant the calls? And why did the break-ins on Ridgewood Lane stop as soon as he took over patrol? That afternoon, I found myself in the records room, surrounded by filing cabinets that smelled of mildew and ink. Reeves was there, already rifling through the hiring files. She held up Warren's application. "Look at this," she whispered, voice low. He lists service in 3 different departments: Cedar Falls, Cedarwood County, and Easton City, but none of them have a record for a Thomas Warren. My stomach twisted. I took the folder from her and scanned the listed badge numbers, academy certifications, and awards. Everything checked out on paper, but only on paper. "Could be a clerical error," I offered weakly. Reeves gave me a look I've come to recognize as her detective glare. Calm, cold, unyielding. "Or a cover-up," she said. "Check the references." I nodded and set to work. First, I called Cedar Falls PD's personnel office. The woman on the line consulted her computer. "No record of a Thomas Warren in our system," she told me. Next, Easton City. Same result, Cedarwood County. Nothing. My pulse pounded. Each negative answer rang louder than a gunshot. I jotted notes in my pad, hand shaking. I glanced over. Reeves was already dialing a number. A few hours later, we reconvened in a cubicle, maps and logs spread out like a detective's war room. Reeves held up a printout of Warren's alleged academy certification. "This number belongs to an officer who died in 1981. Officer James Halstead," she said. "He was killed in the line of duty." I felt the air thin. On the wall beside us, a framed photograph of Halstead appeared, musty from decades of wear. His face looked stern, proud, a uniformed man with a life cut short. And now his identity was stolen. Reeves tapped the certification number on the printout. "Warren's entire background is a fabrication. This guy Pierce used Halstead's credentials as a template." I exhaled, tension flooding my chest. "Pierce?" Reeves met my eye. "David Russell Pierce, a security system salesman with a record of fraud. He's bounced through Missouri, Indiana, and now here. He dated a dispatcher, got hold of police manuals and insider procedures. Then he used that knowledge to impersonate an officer." My head spun. The Ridgewood break-ins stopped not because Warren kept suspects away, but because he committed them himself, wearing a stolen badge. My respect for his uniform felt like betrayal. Reeves leaned in. "We need more proof, a search warrant, physical evidence, victims willing to testify, but we have to act fast before Pierce catches wind." We moved quickly. Reeves drafted the warrant for Warren's apartment, citing impersonation, fraud, and malicious prosecution. I collected affidavits from the Hargraves and the Buchanans, each recounting Warren's courteous yet oddly probing visits. They remembered the security recommendations, but none suspected the salesman in uniform was the predator. That night, armed with the warrant and accompanied by a search team, I drove to Warren's rented duplex on Elm Street. The building's vinyl siding glistened under street lamps, and my reflection stared back at me in the windows, tired eyes beneath a badge I still believed in. I parked behind the cruiser and moved quietly with Reeves and 2 officers. My heart pounded as we approached the front door. The lock gave way easily. Inside, the living room was immaculate. Impeccable cleanliness that spoke of a man who prided himself on control. A wall-to-wall bookshelf held uniform police procedure manuals, marked with tabs and handwritten notes. Each page highlighted a protocol Pierce had memorized. Entry techniques, arrest procedures, courtroom testimony tips. I swept my flashlight across the room and found closed binders on a side table labeled Safeguard Solutions Referrals. I snapped photos. Hundreds of names, addresses, commission percentages. Each entry corresponded to a Ridgewood residence. Reeves signaled to me, "Check the closet." I turned the knob and felt the catch release. Inside, bins labeled Ridgewood, Buchanan, Hargrave, Carroll revealed stolen jewelry, electronics, and personal documents. Evidence never recovered from the original break-ins. My stomach twisted. He'd kept trophies hidden behind the guise of community service. Then I spotted it. A leather-bound notebook wrapped in a thin chain and lock. Reeves pried it open. The pages were meticulous. Surveillance notes, routes timed to the minute, gate codes, household schedules. Under Carroll, a scrawled line read, "Frame, Carroll, diversion complete." It was the blueprint of every crime, planned and executed from the heart of our department. Warren, Pierce, had weaponized the uniform, exploiting the trust we placed in police authority. I radioed dispatch. Unit 5 to major crimes. We have evidence, records, stolen goods, diaries. Pierce's real identity confirmed, requesting custody and extraction. My voice shook, but the words were clear. As we cuffed him, Pierce looked up with that cold resignation I'd heard about in the court transcripts. "They gave me the keys to the kingdom," he said quietly. "I just walked in." It was a confession and a dirge. The betrayal cut deepest because I'd believed. Him. Believed in the badge, never questioning the man beneath it. Outside, I escorted Pierce to the cruiser. Reeves dropped the leading edge of the notebook into an evidence bag. The night air was heavy. Ridgewood Lane felt miles away, but the memory of each courteous nod, each security pitch weighed on me. We'd uncovered his deception, but at what cost? Trust, once broken, isn't easily restored. As the cruiser pulled away, I stared at the duplex's dark windows. No welcome glint of porch lights here. Instead, a silent testament to how authority can be faked, how a celebrity uniform can hide a criminal's face. And I knew the real story, the one that would never fully make the news, lay buried in those redacted files, waiting for the day someone else dared to uncover it. Detective Reeves and I returned to headquarters in the early hours, hauling armfuls of evidence, binders of referrals, notebooks overflowing with surveillance logs, plastic bags of stolen jewelry and electronics, and that cursed leather-bound diary. The evidence room's cold fluorescent lights hummed over us as we sorted each item into sealed boxes labeled Warren Pierce Investigation. Every time I lifted a box lid, a new layer of betrayal revealed itself. A Safeguard Solutions price sheet scrawled with discounts for preferred clients. Security camera installation logs annotated with personal comments. Even photographs tucked between pages. Images of Ridgewood residents through their windows, captured on Warren's borrowed binoculars. By sunrise, the station was a flurry of controlled chaos. Uniformed officers escorted Pierce to booking. CSI technicians dusted the duplex for latent prints. Internal Affairs locked themselves in a conference room to pore over hiring protocols. Through it all, Reeves and I prepared for the next step, presenting the case to the state's attorney for formal charges. I sat in the interrogation room across from Pierce, who stared at me with steady, unblinking eyes. He wore the same blue jumpsuit as any jailed offender, but the confidence in his posture was that of a man in a tailored suit addressing a boardroom. I laid out the evidence: handcuffed leather journal, stolen property catalogs, referral commission statements, and watched his face for a flicker of remorse. There was none. He leaned forward, voice low. "You think you've taken me down, Detective, but you forget. Every file I opened, every folder you sealed, is a reminder of how deep this runs." I felt a shiver. His words hinted at accomplices, others who had the same access, the same inside knowledge. "Others?" I asked, heart pounding. Think of all the referrals I made, inside contacts at Safeguard, executives who knew too much to question me, dispatchers who handled my calls. Suddenly, the break-ins in Cedarwood County from 1980 flashed through my mind, unsolved. The similar pattern in Easton City in 1979. Pierce's claimed previous postings spanned decades and jurisdictions. What if his scheme wasn't unique to Huntington? What if there was a network, an unbroken chain of fake officers preying on affluent neighborhoods under the guise of community policing? I left the interrogation rattled, Reeves at my side. "We have to expand this," she said, voice tight. "We need to contact those agencies, see if they have cold files that match his M.O." Over the next week, Reeves and I drafted a multi-jurisdictional alert. We sent secure memos to Cedar Falls, Cedarwood County, Easton City, and any department ever listing a Thomas Warren or similar badge numbers to check for suspicious hires, unexplained home security recommendations, and resolved cases that matched Pierce's pattern. Each letter we sent felt like tossing a stone into a deep well, unsure if any ripples would ever reach the surface. Meanwhile, the local press got wind of the arrest. Headlines screamed, "Ridgewood's guardian angel unmasked as master criminal." Neighbors called the station, expressing relief, outrage, disbelief. The Hargraves demanded a public apology. Carelli's family begged for his record to be cleared immediately. I spent hours signing transcripts exonerating Carell, rectifying Warren's false arrest. Still, the public narrative focused on the sensational: a fake cop, a fraudster, a headline. But in our office, the real story lurked beneath layers. The unspoken question of how many others out there bore stolen credentials. How many communities had welcomed strangers in uniform whose badges hid ulterior motives. Late one night, as I prepared the final draft of our multi-agency alert, Reeves knocked and slid a folder across my desk. Inside were scanned images from the Missouri dispatch logs where Pierce's ex-girlfriend had worked. I clicked through them. Calls placed at odd hours. Security system trouble tickets closed before the technician arrived. Inquiries about patrol schedules. Footnotes in the logs read simply, TJW, Thomas J. Warren, even though the dispatcher's voicemail traced back to DRP, David Russell Pierce. I leaned back, mind racing. Reeves cleared her throat. "We need to move fast," she said. "If there are accomplices or successors covering their tracks, we might be the only shot at stopping the next wave." I nodded. "Tomorrow, we brief the chief and the state police. Then, we'll secure every file, host every transcript, and force those departments to scrub their logs. We'll build a public registry. Anyone can check their security installer or police liaison. No more secrets." Reeves offered a rare, tired smile. "It's the only way." As I left the station that night, the dawn just beginning to pale the sky, I realized the case had grown beyond Ridgewood Lane's plush lawns. It had become a cautionary tale for every department, a reminder that authority, once stripped to its insignia, could be as dangerous as any weapon, and that the uniform, the badge, and the oath entrusted to us must never be taken on faith alone, because faith, once misplaced, leaves communities exposed to predators hiding in plain sight. The state's attorney's office was a fortress of polished wood and hushed corridors. Lots of suits and ties, a heavy mahogany table in the grand conference room that smelled faintly of old leather. Detective Reeves and I arrived just before 10 a.m., carrying boxes of evidence and stacks of bound reports. We set them before Assistant State's Attorney Marisol Diaz, a sharp-eyed woman known for prosecuting complex white-collar crimes. Diaz tapped her pen against the table, reviewing the chain of custody for the leather journal, the stolen property logs, and the Safeguard Solutions referral commissions. Each exhibit had to be properly annotated, date seized, location cataloged, and every signature in the chain verified. Reeves and I worked through each, cross-referencing arrest reports, dash cam transcripts, dispatch logs, and the interview recordings with Pierce. Her nod was subtle but decisive when each document satisfied the strict evidentiary standards. Diaz looked up. "This is solid," she said. "But without corroborating victim testimony or direct admission, we need to shore up the conspiracy angle. Pierce's confession about accomplices. Any proof?" Reeves exchanged a glance with me. "We have the Missouri dispatch logs," she began, showing him operating on a dispatcher's credentials and closing calls before any patrol arrived. The logs reference TJW code tied to him. We also have Safeguard Commission statements showing coded references to precinct leadership receiving kickbacks. Diaz raised an eyebrow. "Precinct leadership?" I slid forward a redacted email thread we'd recovered from Safeguard Solutions' corporate server, a forensic copy made before Pierce's arrest. The thread was between Pierce and a high-ranking company executive named Leonard Hayes. In it, Pierce arranged referral deals and hinted at protecting those who gave him business. Hayes's replies contained vague assurances. "Your initiative has been invaluable. We'll handle the paperwork on our end. No need to involve too many people. Keep it between us." Every line was damning. Diaz scrolled through her tablet. "We'll add Hayes as a co-conspirator. He'll face charges for aiding and abetting." A grin flickered across Reeves's face. A rare victory in a case that had felt endless. "Good," she whispered. "Let's make sure the uniform-stealing ring is fully exposed." We spent the next hour mapping out the indictment. Impersonation of a law enforcement officer, Pierce, burglary, and theft, multiple counts, evidence tampering and frame-up, Carolee's wrongful arrest, fraudulent security referrals, kickbacks from Hayes, conspiracy to commit burglary, Hayes's involvement. By noon, the state's attorney signed off on the indictment. We had a court date set and press embargo scheduled. Outside the chamber, San Diego-style TV crews clamored for statements. Reeves and I declined comment, knowing the story's full depth would emerge during the trial. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Officers whispered in hallways, casting wary glances at the station's old files and personnel records. I returned to my desk to find a brown envelope addressed to me, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in courier font. "Stop digging. Let it go, or you'll be next." The threat was clinical, lacking any flourish. A simple warning. My stomach churned. Whoever sent this knew precisely how to intimidate me. It wasn't Pierce. He was securely in custody. It had to be someone with access to our investigative scope. someone watching our every move. I showed the note to Reeves, her jaw clenched. "We're stirring up a hornet's nest," she said quietly, "but we can't back down." We traced the envelope's postmark. A small town, 120 miles north, one of the towns in Pierce's alleged service history. No clear fingerprints, but the paper matched official. Stationery used in the administrative offices of the very PDs he'd falsified. Whoever sent it could be an insider. I filed the threat as evidence and requested plainclothes security for our team. The department reluctantly approved increased patrols around our homes and the station itself. Suddenly, every knock at the door or newsroom reporter at my window felt like a potential danger. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in the dark, imagining someone slipping into my room, waving a badge to disarm me. The badge, my badge, should convey trust, not fear. My phone buzzed, a news alert from the local paper. The headline read, "Officer Impersonator, Local Hero or Mastermind." I tapped the story. It recapped the basics but hinted at shadowy backers and higher-ups wanting to bury the full details. It echoed my own fears that some in the department or city leadership would prefer certain truths stayed hidden. Pierce was a symptom of a larger rot, and Hefnes the mayor, city council members, and local business elites had benefited from the Ridgewood Miracle police coverage. I closed the browser and stared at the ceiling. Dawn brought duty, but the day ahead felt perilous. Tomorrow, I'd return to my desk, re-enter the labyrinth of files, and follow every thread, because if I didn't, the people who sent that note would win. By dawn's pale light, the precinct felt like a fortress bracing for siege. Every hallway buzzed with hushed conversations, officers trading theories, support staff locking offices, and Sergeant Vega posted outside the major crime suite. Even the cleaning crew paused their rounds to glance at the boxes of evidence stacked behind locked doors. The brown envelope warning still sat on my desk, a silent testament to how far someone would go to protect buried truths. I took a moment in the locker room, fastening my badge and adjusting my holster. The metal felt cool against my skin, a reminder of the authority I wielded and the betrayal I'd uncovered. With a deep breath, I stepped into the briefing room where Reeves, Vega, and the state police liaison waited. We formed a semicircle around the conference table, where Diaz and Hayes' indictment lay printed in bold. Detective Reeves spoke first. "We have a court hearing today. Judge Marlowe will review our evidence before setting a trial date. But we also need to serve subpoenas to safeguard executives and dispatch personnel who handled Pierce's calls. We need their testimony on the record." I nodded, turning to the state police liaison, Special Agent Cole. "We'll need your assistance serving federal subpoenas. Safeguard's CEO operates nationwide. Hayes' involvement may trigger federal charges under the Hobbs Act." Cole tapped his notepad. "I'll coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We'll get travel orders and backup for witness protection. Hayes will need 24/7 security detail once he's served." Vega raised her hand. "There's also the matter of internal leaks. This note wasn't mailed from Ridgewood. It came from..." She paused, scanning a printout. "Jackson County PD records. Someone there used departmental letterhead." I felt my pulse spike. Jackson County, one of Pierce's claimed former posts. The threat wasn't local, it was part of the broader network. Whoever sent the note had resources, connections, and the temerity to challenge an active state investigation. Reeves added, "We should bring in IA from Jackson County to review who had access to their letterhead and envelopes. We need to narrow down potential suspects, dispatchers, administrative staff, even chiefs who might have colluded." Diaz closed her folder. "We'll seek judicial approval for cross-jurisdictional assistance. and will move forward with arraignment today. Pierce and Hayes in custody by afternoon. That way, the grand jury has formal suspects to consider. The courthouse steps were crowded by local reporters when Reeves and I arrived with Pierce and Hayes in separate security details. Flashbulbs popped, but both men wore stoic expressions, Pierce's cold resignation and Hayes's corporate composure. We stood at the back of the gallery as the clerk read the charges: impersonation, fraud, burglary, racketeering, and conspiracy. The air was electric with tension. As the judge set bond at 0 and remanded both to custody, Pierce caught my eye and nodded once, almost respectfully. Hayes avoided my gaze entirely. Outside, the media storm swirled. Shocked Senate put Safeguard on notice. Exposed, the Ridgewood miracle, scandal deepens, badge of deceit, local hero or villain. Reeves and I retreated to a private hallway. She exhaled. We did it. They're officially tied to the case. But my triumph felt hollow. I knew Hayes's conviction wouldn't erase the fact that every system he touched was compromised. Every badge, every referral, and every file. Trust in the badge was shattered. Back at the precinct, I convened a special task force meeting with Jackson County, Iowa, Safeguard's compliance officer, and representatives from 3 other affected departments. We laid out the pattern: fake officer hires, stolen credentials, security referrals, and redacted incident reports. The attendees gasped at the scale. Several dispatchers, clerks, and mid-level supervisors sat in stunned silence, people I'd trusted as partners in public safety. We planned a comprehensive audit. Personnel files. Verify every hire since 1975 with in-person checks. Dispatch logs. Compare voice recordings, call times, and badge codes against actual patrol activity. Safeguard contracts. Cross-reference installations with police referrals. Cold cases. Reopen unresolved break-ins and car prowls linked to suspicious hires. Public registry. Publish a trusted officer list with verified badges and IDs. As we divided tasks, a uniformed IA investigator handed me a folder stamped Huntington PD, classified. Inside was a single sheet, an old HR memo from 1982 recommending expedited hiring procedures, no fingerprint checks, no out-of-state verifications, due to budget constraints. The memo was signed by Chief Williams, who'd retired 5 years earlier. I felt bile rise in my throat. Our vulnerability was not just Pierce's brilliance, it was institutional greed and desperation. Shortcuts taken, checks skipped, trust abused. The agency had been begging for bodies, and someone had exploited that desperation to gain full access. That evening, I sat alone in my empty living room. The evidence boxes waited in the corner, dust collecting on their lids. I poured a glass of bourbon and stared at the wall where my family photos hung. My wife on our wedding day, my daughter's kindergarten picture, moments of innocence preserved in frames. I fingered the leather journal's lock beneath the glass tabletop, recalling Pierce's confession. They gave me the keys to the kingdom. I whispered to the empty room. They gave me the badge. I thought that made me safe. My wife's voice echoed in my mind. Be careful, she'd warned the morning of the first break-in. Don't let the job change who you are. There, in the silence, I realized the final truth. The badge doesn't protect you from the world. It exposes you. It demands you stand between chaos and order, but if you lose faith in it, the uniform becomes a tool of fear rather than security. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of every file in evidence, every redacted report, and every coerced confession. I knew the network might still lurk in the shadows, waiting for the next crisis to exploit. But I also knew this. by shining light on the buried files, on the suppressed truths, I could push back the darkness, even if only a little. The weekend brought a fragile quiet, a lull before the storm, or so I hoped. I spent Saturday morning meeting with Jackson County, Iowa investigators who were combing through decades-old personnel files and dispatch tapes. They uncovered more anomalies. A 1987 Ridgewood break-in quietly closed as juvenile prank. A 1994 gas station robbery reported under a badge number never assigned to anyone, and a 2001 residential burglary where the responding officer's name was blacked out in the log. Meanwhile, Safeguard Solutions compliance teams compiled internal emails confirming Leonard Hayes' role in approving special arrangements for officer-recommended installations. One email from 1995 read, "Officer referral code TJW is outperforming all others. Keep track of these contacts and expedite their installs. I'll handle any inquiries." That email alone created an unbroken thread from Pierce's fraudulent referrals to corporate complicity. Proof that this was no lone wolf, but a coordinated scheme spanning decades. But the deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. On Sunday, my phone buzzed with a text from an unrecognized number. "Step away, or your file will be sealed next." No signature, no return address, just another warning. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over reply. Then I locked the screen. Detective Reeves suggested we bring in federal cybercrime specialists to trace the message. We needed to find the source, someone within law enforcement networks or corporate servers. Every threat, every envelope, every redacted page showed the system was fighting back. On Monday, Special Agent Cole arrived with 2 members of the FBI's Cyber Division. Their laptops hummed as they cross-referenced IP addresses, mail server logs, and dispatch software access records. Within hours, they traced the anonymous text to a burner phone tied to dispatch terminals in Jackson County. That narrowed our suspect list to a half-dozen clerks and dispatchers who handled Pierce's calls. One by one, we interviewed them under controlled conditions. Several broke under questioning. One dispatcher admitted forging call logs to cover Pierce's movements, pressured by Hayes' covert payments. Another clerk confessed forwarding internal emails to unknown addresses in exchange for off-the-books cash. Each confession pulled another invisible thread, revealing the network's reach. By Wednesday, subpoenas were served on 5 individuals: 2 Jackson County dispatchers, a Safeguard regional manager, and a Jackson County administrative supervisor who had authorized the rapid hiring protocols. Each faced charges ranging from obstruction of justice to conspiracy. The revelations stunned the department. Officers I'd trained with stared at each other in disbelief. Civilian staff members whispered apologies, their trust in uniforms shaken. And through it all, I kept thinking of the Hargraves, Carelli's family, and every Ridgewood resident who had let a stranger into their home because of a badge. That Thursday, Reeves and I met with Chief Marshall in his office, a modest room lined with plaques and commendations. He stood behind his desk, folding and unfolding a copy of the August 1981 precinct memo that had exempted new hires from fingerprint checks. "Our hands were tied," he began. "Budget cuts, retirements. We needed bodies." I laid out the mounting evidence: fraudulent hires, forged credentials, corporate kickbacks, dispatch collusion, and direct threats. "This wasn't just Pierce," I said. "It was an entire system built on shortcuts and silence." Chief Marshall's shoulders sagged. "I upheld the law," he said quietly, "but I failed to protect it." He agreed to testify before the grand jury and fully cooperate with DOJ oversight. That afternoon, under his direction, the department announced sweeping reforms. Mandatory FBI fingerprint and background checks for every officer at hire, annual audits of dispatch logs and referral codes, and a public portal where citizens could verify their officers' credentials online. The press coverage swelled. Local papers hailed Huntington's courageous reforms, and national outlets spotlighted the department's new transparency initiative. But no headline could erase the damage done, nor the trauma inflicted on the community. The final piece came Friday, when we met with Michael Carelli. His name had been cleared weeks earlier, but the scars remained. His parents sat with their arms around him in the interview room, eyes red. We recorded his testimony for the trial. I lost everything that night, my job, my reputation, my trust in the police. When I saw Warren in uniform, I believed him. I thought justice was being done. He sobbed quietly, then looked at me. Thank you for finding the real thief. His words cut straight to my core. It wasn't just the system that betrayed him. It was all of us who took uniforms at face value. I nodded, wiping my own eyes. I'm sorry, I said. We'll make it right. His testimony became a focal point in court. A young man nearly ruined by a false arrest, vindicated only by one detective's persistence. The jury saw the personal toll, the broken trust, and convicted Pierce and Hayes on all counts. The morning after Carril's testimony, the precinct felt different. Less frantic, but no less vigilant. The temporary calm masked the undercurrent of tension. Ongoing interviews, subpoenas, and the hum of federal investigators sweeping through Jackson County and Huntington PD alike. Every conversation echoed with accountability and remorse. I took a moment in the lieutenant's office to review the latest case logs, the digital files now ringed in red verified stamps thanks to our new audit system. Then my phone buzzed. An encrypted email from Special Agent Cole flashed on the screen. Meet me at the Jackson County Dispatch Center. Urgent revelation. I frowned. Jackson County hadn't yet fully cooperated with our internal audit, and I suspected some were still covering tracks. I called Reeves. She agreed to join, and by midday we drove out to the center under the guise of routine oversight. The dispatch floor was eerily quiet. Terminals sat locked, radios silent. Agent Cole greeted us, leaning against the dispatch supervisor's station. His expression was grim. Monroe, Reeves, he said softly. We found something in the server logs. Timestamps from 3 separate terminals showing encrypted file transfers to an external IP address. The files were not call logs, but personnel records. Hiring documents, background checks, fingerprint results, all the files you'd expect to find in an HR archive. Reeves's eyes narrowed. So, someone was siphoning off complete personnel dossiers, she murmured. Cole handed us a printout with network traces. The destination was a private server belonging to a shell company, Midnight Protocol LLC. Tracing it leads back to a P.O. box in Huntington. My pulse quickened. This was beyond Pierce and Hayes. Someone had been hoarding the department's deepest files, ready to weaponize them as needed. The institution-wide cleansing we'd begun was vulnerable without those archives. I asked, do we have an address for this P.O. box? Cole nodded. We do. Investigators are on their way to serve a search warrant, but you might want to see what they find. The shell company's address was a nondescript office in an aging brick complex. We arrived with Cole, Reeves, and 2 state police agents. The building's glass door hung crooked on its hinge. Inside, dusty cubicles stood deserted, wires trailing from broken terminals. In the back, a locked office door bore a faded plaque, Midnight Protocol LLC. We forced it open. The room was a shrine to secrecy. floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with external hard drives, stacks of paper files, and binders labeled with precinct names and years. Huntington PD 1980 to 1990. Jackson County 1995 to 2005. Ridgewood asset logs. In one corner, a desktop computer sat powered on, screensaver flickering, mountains at sunset. We snapped USB drives to copy the data. Reeves rifled through a binder marked Dispatch HD Log 1984 to 2004. She gasped, "Look at this. Personnel files for every dispatcher in Jackson County, complete with home addresses and shift patterns." I found a stack of HR folders annotated in a familiar handwriting. Speed hire, bypass verification, safe contacts only. Underneath, a smudged fingerprint card, an incomplete print half covered by Pierce's notebook chain. Someone had used Pierce's stolen credentials to access every background check and dispatch log, ensuring no one noticed missing records until it was too late. Cole called in the hall. "FBI Cyber is downloading everything now. We'll reconstruct personnel histories, patch gaps, and alert every impacted officer. This goes beyond old omissions. That's organized data theft for decades." Back at headquarters, the evidence intake room overflowed with boxes from the Shell office. I watched Reeves and Cole coordinate chain of custody tags. The night dragged on as federal analysts loaded massive drives. At 2:37 a.m., Reeves nudged me, pointing to her tablet. "Look at this user account. Sysadmin 1982. Logged into every server. Dispatch, HR, evidence lockers. That account has been active intermittently since 1982. The implication hit me like a punch. A single, persistent insider. Someone with system-wide privileges. Someone who had orchestrated the data theft for over 3 decades. The pattern predated Pierce's arrival. Pierce was a cog in a more extensive operation. I shivered. The uniform-stealing ring wasn't just opportunistic criminals. It was a deeply embedded network of insiders, maintaining control through erased files and silent complicity. Distrust seeped into every corner of my mind. I left the station at sunrise, footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. My uniform felt like a costume. Stolen, reissued, perforated by betrayal. At home, my daughter's untouched drawings lay on the fridge. My wife's affectionate note from the night before felt like a lifeline in a storm. I leaned into her when she greeted me, voice trembling. "They've been hiding in the system since the 80s. She held me steady, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I knew my drive for truth risked more than my career. It risked our safety. But to ignore the files, to leave racks of missing records in the hands of the silent architect, was unthinkable. On Monday, armed with our reconstructed data and logs, we presented our findings to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The sysadmin account's access keys, a handwritten master logbook discovered among the files, linked directly to a retired chief of police, Arthur Whitman, now in his 90s. The charges: grand larceny of government records, obstruction of justice, racketeering, and conspiracy. Whitman's arrest was a quiet affair. No handcuffs, no TV cameras, just an elderly man led from his mansion in a wheelchair to an unmarked van. His legacy exposed as the mastermind who cultivated trust in the badge for decades, then abused it at whim. His name was scrubbed from station rosters, his plaques removed, and his memoirs pulped. Standing outside the courthouse after Whitman's arraignment, I felt the weight of history shift. The case spanned nearly 40 years. Hundreds of names taken, files erased, and trust shattered. But at last, the buried files were unearthed, the system purged, and the network unraveling. As I looked back at the courthouse steps, the soft hum of a police cruiser idled behind me. I checked my badge. Still mine, still real. I inhaled deeply. The uniform calls me to protect, not to hide. And though the road ahead will be long, I will marshal every file, every witness, and every ounce of conviction to ensure no one ever buries the truth again. This badge means something, I whispered to the spring air, and it always will. The week after Chief Whitman's arrest marked a turning point, but the cleanup would take years. I spent long hours reviewing the newly recovered files, cross-linking them with cold case reports and dispatch logs. Each revelation felt like closing a wound, yet the scar remained. Detective Reeves and I coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office to protect key witnesses and prepare for the upcoming racketeering trial that would finally expose the system's deepest rot. Late one night, Reeves tapped me on the shoulder as I scanned pages of the Ridgewood Security Initiative ledger. "You need to hear this," she said, handing me a thick manila envelope. Inside were handwritten letters from victims, homeowners, the Carril family, even dispatchers who'd helped Pierce unwittingly. One letter, dated April 1985, burned its words into my mind. Deputy Warren told me my home was secure. I trusted him. He sold me safes, cameras. He recommended the works. Then he came back later, smiled, and pocketed the diamond bracelet I'd shown him as gratitude. I never saw him again. My grip tightened on the envelope. The betrayal had begun the first night Pierce donned the stolen uniform. Every handshake, every security demonstration, every friendly check on a locked door had been a test, an opportunity to gather details, assess vulnerability, and strike. The uniform had been the perfect disguise. By Thursday, Reeves and I organized a community forum at the Huntington Civic Center. We invited Ridgewood residents, dispatchers, safeguard customers, and even former Jackson County officers who'd since retired. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation and anger. Survivors took the stage one by one, sharing stories of trust misplaced, lost heirlooms, and the fear that had haunted them long after Pierce's arrest. I stepped up to the microphone, uniform immaculately pressed but my voice tight. "We failed you," I began. "We gave the badge to a man unworthy of it. We let paperwork replace due diligence. But from this day forward, this badge symbolizes a promise to vet every officer, to never bury a file, and to listen when a single voice says, 'Something's wrong.'" Applause erupted. Tears glistened under the stage lights, and for the first time since Pierce's betrayal, I felt a measure of redemption. The community's willingness to confront the past and demand reform offered hope that trust could be rebuilt, stone by careful stone. Back at headquarters, the trial logistics consumed every spare hour. Reeves and I worked with prosecutors to select exhibits: the stolen jewelry, the forged certifications, the dispatch logs, and the shell company's hard drives. We arranged protective custody for key dispatchers and IT staff ready to testify. Outside, news vans circled, and cameras plastered our successes across local broadcasts. But beneath the surface, a quieter drama played out. Retired officers and administrators, who'd abetted Whitman's regime through silent complicity, began resigning or quietly retiring. Some left notes of regret, others vanished from public view. The department had shed more than 3 decades of systemic rot, but the echoes of complicity lingered in empty chairs and dusty lockers. One afternoon, Reeves and I received an anonymous tip to examine an unmarked storage locker at the county archives. The address led us to a dim, windowless facility behind the old courthouse. Inside, row upon row of steel lockers sat under flickering fluorescent lights. A single unit, number 47, bore fresh padlock marks. We cut the lock and slid open the corrugated door. Inside lay files bearing the insignia of multiple departments: Jackson County PD, Huntington PD, Safeguard Solutions. Hundreds of manila folders stamped "Confidential" and "Destroy after 90 days" lined the shelves. I reached for one labeled "Pierce Investigation," surveillance photos, and flipped it open. High-resolution images of Ridgewood homes, deputy schedules, gate codes, and personal details the public never knew he had. These files hadn't surfaced in the initial raids. They'd been systematically archived, hidden by the silent architects to shield themselves if the primary operation was exposed. The weight of those files pressed down on me. The betrayal ran deeper than any single fraudster or corrupt executive. It was embedded in the bureaucracy, in the culture of "don't ask, don't tell," in the default acceptance that a badge was beyond question. As we carried the locker's contents back to the station, Reeves and I plotted the final steps: digital preservation of every folder, public release of redacted case files, and a new policy requiring all "confidential" designations to be reviewed by an independent civilian oversight board. The old ways, where files could be buried to protect reputations, would end. Transparency would prevail, even if painful. That night, I found myself in the station's evidence room, alone. I placed the leather-bound Pierce journal atop the newly discovered archives and flicked off the overhead lights. In the dim glow of the hall's exit sign, I said aloud to the rows of darkened lockers, "Every file has a story. Every story deserves to be told." I closed the door, locking away the evidence and the betrayal, knowing that its truth would now stand in the light, unburied and unavoidable. The trial began on a crisp November morning. The courthouse steps ringed with protesters and press. On one side, family members of victims clutched signs, "Never forget," and "Erase the shield, not the files." On the other, uniformed officers and community leaders gathered to show solidarity with the reforms and honor the oath we'd recommitted to. I stood among them, badge gleaming, heart pounding with the anticipation of final reckoning. Inside the packed courtroom, Assistant State's Attorney Diaz delivered opening statements that laid bare the decades of deceit. This case is not merely about one man's criminal genius. It is about a network of corruption that exploited the most fundamental trust we place in those sworn to protect us, our police forces. It is about the files that were buried and the lives that were shattered because of that silence. Today, we confront that betrayal. She paused, letting the words hang in the air as photographs of Ridgewood Lane, dispatch logs, and shrine artifacts were displayed on large screens. The jurors, ordinary citizens, looked on with expressions of shock and resolve. One by one, dispatchers, clerks, and retired officers took the stand. Each told a piece of the story. Dispatcher Linda Harper, who admitted forging call records under pressure, wept as she described the fear of losing her job if she spoke out. Sergeant Mike Delgado, forced into early retirement for raising concerns, recounted how his warnings were ignored, how Chief Whitman silenced him. Safeguard technician Rachel Owens, whose logs were altered to cover up referral schemes, detailed how Hayes coerced her with promises of promotions. Then came Michael Carreely, testifying with quiet dignity. I trusted the badge, but I remember standing in that cell and realizing nothing was sacred, not even the symbol meant to protect me. His words echoed in the silent courtroom, a stark reminder of the real human toll. Pierce sat impassive as his fate was explained, convicted on all counts, facing a combined sentence of 45 years without parole. Hayes, visibly shaken, absorbed a 25-year term for conspiracy and racketeering. But the larger network, the silent architects, remained unspoken. Whitman's trial loomed next, and several others were under indictment. 2 dispatchers, an admin supervisor, and 1 retired city council member who'd facilitated budget cuts that enabled rushed hires. After closing arguments, we filed back into the courthouse hallway. I caught Reeves's eye. We nodded to each other. There was satisfaction, but also the weight of unfinished business. Some files, we knew, still lay hidden in private archives or forgotten cabinets. Some names hadn't been spoken, some accounts forgotten by time. As court adjourned, I stepped outside into the fading light. Beyond the gasps of wind and distant traffic, I felt the living pulse of Huntington. Changed, wary, but more vigilant. Neighbors who once accepted the badge without question now paused at the sight of a patrol car, emboldened to ask, "Who are you?" and "Can I see your credentials?" That night, back at home, I placed the final court transcript on the mantel beside my daughter's photo and my wife's letter. I turned off the living room light and stood in the darkness, listening to the hum of the city beyond our windows. The uniform hung silently on its hook, no longer a symbol of blind faith, but of earned trust. I whispered into the quiet, "I carry these files so the buried truth will never be forgotten, so the lives lost will be honored, and so the badge will mean what it was always meant to mean: service, sacrifice, and accountability." A single moth fluttered against the window pane, drawn to the light within. In that fragile moment, I realized that the shadows we expose, the files we unearth, and the voices we amplify shape the future of justice. The trial concluded, but the story, our story, continues in every officer who asks the hard questions, in every community that refuses to bury its past, and in every soul who demands that the badge remain beyond reproach. Because true security lies not in secrets, but in the shared commitment to truth.